Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second half of day number 3 for the Smite World Championship qualifiers, and our good friends over at Maxonomic providing some of the greatest chairs out there for all of you Smite fans. And we got Veneno sitting by, actually modeling off one of the newest additions here, the Smite Maxonomic Extra Large chair, the big and tall version. Mifflin, I haven't had the pleasure of getting to sit in that chair just yet. That's usually reserved for you, Gore, and Aggro. How much more comfy is that one than just the standard chair?
Well, I think I might be the target demographic, so I personally really do like that chair, man. If you guys are not a fan of the standard, like, DX Racer style of chair where it's got, like, the sports car, like, curve-ups on the edge, the larger versions, more of a flat seat, you can kind of go cross-legged in there. I'm sure Paul would love that, so he can do his, like, L from Death Note thing. I like it. I'm a huge fan. I might buy one.
Well, there you go. If that's not enough to say the chair, then I don't know what is. Make sure to go over to our new link provided to you guys. The way you guys can pick one of those up, needforseat.com, the hrz.io/SmiteMax, whatever that link was that we popped up to there. I already forgot it right off the top of my head. But thank you so much to Maxonomic for being the channel sponsor here in Season 8 of the SPL and continuing on even potentially more beyond there. Pick up your Smite chair, whether it be the regular or the XL. Set number 2 of the day is set to be a big one here, Mifflin. We got the Olympus Bolts and the Valhalla Valkyries. The Valkyries now with a small change up to their roster. Johnny is going to be replaced by Ice in this instance around in the jungle. So bringing in some old talent, I will say. Ice has been around the scene for quite some time here in the scene, but now replacing Johnny.
Yeah, talent so old you might have to put an E at the end of old, right? This is like old.
Old D.
Yeah, well, no, I think the E is still silent.
Old day?
No, I mean...
Well, you'd say like yield.
Yeah, like ye old.
Okay, so we got some yield talent of Ice, formerly Ice Baby. That's how long it's been around, as he's even had a name change from Ice Baby down to just Ice. First set of the day is said and done. Jade Dragon's got the 3-0 over Sleekness now. It's the Olympus Bolts and the Valhalla Valkyries. We got the Olympus Bolts here in the studio. The Valkyries, unfortunately, were not able to make it here towards the studio. And as I said, Johnny being replaced by Ice on this team for the remainder of this tournament, for the remainder of the year on. Taking a look at the bracket. Winner of this game goes out to face against the Jade Dragons. Loser has to go down and play up against Sleekness.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this set, man. I said yesterday that there probably is a pretty heavy favorite coming into this one. The Olympus Bolts have been playing together for a very long time. Used to go under the team name Renegades, have essentially stayed together since then. Whereas the Valhalla Valkyries have seen some, it's a newer team this year, and now they've got a shift up coming into this exact set, losing one of their star players. Johnny was one of the silver linings for this squad. Now Ice has some pretty large shoes to fill.
Yeah, it's going to be a big one. It's going up against a very big team here in the Olympus Bolts. I mean, in Phase 2, they went on like a 8-win streak, and then Phase 3, they come in here, and they had an unfortunate spill up against the Jade Dragons during the playoffs and whatnot here, but now back and raring for another opportunity and maybe a little bit hungry to try and get their revenge up against Jade Dragons. And who better to try that through than Veneno? I mean, we've been talking a lot about how the mid lane meta has developed ever since this Book of the Dead build came out there, and talk about the pioneer of the Zeus Book of the Dead build here with Veneno.
Yeah, Ven loves that style of aggressive play, man. He wants to play these kind of sometimes unorthodox picks like the Morrigan, but he plays it as if he were an assassin. I think in a previous life, Ven probably a jungler, because he loves working his way behind these team fights. Even in these clips, when he's playing frontliners, watch him. He likes to walk straight through the engagement, find those priority targets, plays very aggressive picks. He had another semi-unorthodox pick on the screen right now, Chang'e, essentially the battle mage of Smite. I think that Ven is a great player in this meta because generally, for the first time in like the last 3 or so years, I want to say, in Season 8 now, it kind of is a mid 3v3 meta. If your mid laner is establishing dominance, getting aggressive, you control the mid camps, you can control these greater scorpions. It really is very nice, and that's a play that you love, J-Mac, the multi-man Chang'e ultimates. You love that.
It was only 2, but even getting 2 is still
he's right there, man.
Look, getting 2 is still rather impressive, I will say. It's not the 5-man Chang'e that I love to see, and maybe I hope to never a 5-man Chang'e. I think I would absolutely lose my mind if I saw a game like that one, but Veneno on this Changa, we only saw it previously out of Zeros when it was coming up into these matches, and a couple of other players, Paul, even Veneno here, starting to pick that one up. And we do have Veneno standing by. We talk a lot about him. Let's go ahead and talk to him with Gormizer standing by for our pregame interview.
Yeah, that's right. I got Vin. We're on our comfy chairs. I will say, this has nothing to do with the interview. I've been sitting in that one the last few times.
Yep.
I sit like a degenerate normally. I like to cross my legs and pull them up when I'm sitting down. There is a very noticeable difference now that I'm back in a normal Maxnomic chair than I am when sitting in that one. So
I am comfy.
There's a plug, and he's comfy. You're gonna feel it. You're gonna go back into the booth, and you're gonna be like, oh, "Where'd the room go? I don't know what to do anymore." Either way, you're going up against the Valks here. You, as mentioned, have been playing some slightly unorthodox mid laners. But how have you guys been preparing for this? How have you spent the last few weeks?
We definitely went into the playoffs, and we didn't look too good in the playoffs, so we just kind of wanted to go back and just talk to the whole team together and just see what we wanted to play and make better. Think we kind of went away from what we wanted to play and just started following the meta instead of making a meta, and so we'll see what we got and to show it today.
See if you're making the meta or just playing whatever's left. They had mentioned, Johnny's not going to be the jungler you're going up against. Everybody else is the same for the Valkyries, but you're going to have to deal with Ice. Did you guys make any special preparations for that change of style, or are you more prepared to just, like you said, play your own game?
Ice hasn't played in the Pro League for I think a year now, so he might be a little bit out of it. And I think he's also kind of like a facilitator player instead of more of a carry role. He might have swapped roles depending on what his team needs from him. But yeah, just kind of excited to see what he brings, and we just have to be ready to adapt if anything is special.
Now, I know we've seen a lot of changes in mid, and this is something that I don't think I'm going to get a direct answer from, but you were willing to play things like the Chang'e in the past. Morgan's obviously been a big pick. But, with the items shifting, do you think that kind of most mages are viable now, or is it still the same that we saw towards Phase 3?
I think some characters just don't have the mobility that other characters have, so it's harder to slot in some random picks. But you might see some spicy picks coming out of mid from different players and stuff like that.
I'm excited to see what you have in store for us. Of course, I'm sure everyone's excited to watch the Bolts take on the Valkyries. It's going to come up right after the Dust takes this one through picks and bans.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think an important thing to kind of pull there from Venenu's interview is whenever they were playing up against the Dragons, they were kind of following a meta versus making a meta and kind of playing their own style. And I think that's kind of really the statement for all of the teams that come out here is playing their own style, kind of defining their style, their meta, and then trying to combat what other teams are bringing up here against them. The Olympus Bolts maybe looking to try and kind of redefine their meta here today.
I hope not, man. I'm a student of the meta. If they're doing something completely different, my death segment's going to be pretty bad. I gotta rely on history to figure out what's going on. Look, there obviously is a conversation for finding your own style, right? But there are teams that have just kind of fully adapted to the meta holistically. The Leviathans come to mind for that style of play. They hop on Reddit, they look at the tier list, and they say, all right, that's what we're going to do. With Olympus Bolts, well, according to Ben, that's not exactly what they're looking for.
Well, they're going up against the Valhalla Valkyries, specifically Venenu up against Zeros, and we talked a lot about Venenu's Chang'e, which had some very stellar plays and some highlights. Even if I say it's only a two-man Chang'e, it's still impressive to be able to slam two people, do a lot of damage. But let's talk about Zeros, who was the one who kind of brought the Chang'e back here into the mid lane meta. He was one of the first ones to do it this year.
Yeah, not only the Chang'e, Neath mid is something we've seen a fair bit in the past, or recently rather, and that's something that Zeros loves going towards. Luckily, Gormizer had pulled up Zeros' stat page here on the sheet. I have no clue how to navigate this normally, but since I've got it here, I can share some Gormizer stats with you guys. So far this year, Zeros has played 23 unique gods, and the number of gods that he has acquired a win on is 8. Do the math right there. So
about a third.
Yeah, about a third of the gods that he plays sees success, and I think the ones that you're going to see on the screen right now are likely going to be those. Soul comes to mind. The Chang'e has gotten a couple of wins. The Neath mid has seen some success in the past, and with having a more facilitator style jungle, as Ven said, with Ice now replacing Johnny, I think we can start to see a little bit more so of these hyper carries through mid. We've seen very often Zeros kind of relegates himself a little bit more so towards a facilitator style of play, maybe not necessarily going towards facilitator picks. Now's the time for Zeros, as the veteran of this team, a mainstay of the Valhalla Valkyries, to really step up, and I believe that he can.
And I think it was important also for Veneno to kind of bring up the status on Ice. Hasn't played in the Pro League for a while. He's been playing for the Goodnight Nick roster over in the EU SCC for the majority of this year. And he kind of has been playing more of that facilitator style. He hasn't been going for these hard carries like Johnny likes to go, like the Kalis, the Bakasuras, and things like that.
The Apollos.
The Ullr jungles. We did see a couple of Ullr jungles. One of those did fairly successful. but that's not typically the style that Ice Ice usually goes for. We have seen some very, I'll just call them strange picks come out of him in times over the course of this year, but here in the big leagues and the big moments to shine here, gotta imagine we're going to be seeing a lot of the big meta coming out of this player.
Yeah, I'm expecting like Camazotz, maybe like a Loki or something along those lines. We might even see an Ice Ice that is legitimately just trying to emulate what Johnny has been playing, because the Valhalla Valkyries have been playing around Johnny's style of picks all year. So generally, when you're in a high-stakes situation, you don't want to have to completely shift up your own style that you've been honing. They might just have the Valhalla Valkyries, that is, told him to just play Johnny. Go study Johnny's clips. Go get on the Lokis. Maybe we see an Apollo jungle today. I'm excited.
Do you really want to see an Apollo jungle?
No, I don't. I mean, but like, maybe.
Maybe an Uller jungle. You never know what's going to come out of this team. You never know what's going to come out of these players. Though there is one little stat. I remember Gormize and I talked about it before we even came onto the desk. Haddix only needs 1 kill to get his 500th competitive kill today. So he's got 3 games to get it. You got 3 games to get your 500th kill here, Haddix. Let's jump into picks and bans for game number 1 between the Valkyries and the Bolts in our second semifinal match of the SWC placements here in Group B. We get started out here lovely right out the gate with the Valhalla Valkyries actually going for the first pick slot.
And immediately going towards the Ola Run ban as well. We'll see what the Valhalla Valkyries choose to limit here from the Olympus Bolts. Could be that they've heard through the grapevine that the Bolts are trying to play something completely different themselves, so maybe those historic bans that you'd expect up against the Bolts don't ring true here today. But it seems like the Bolts have done their research. The Valhalla Valkyries are the only team in the SPL to have ever first picked Sun Wukong. Well, that's not an option anymore.
No, and it's really only Ducky who would ever play this god. We saw, like 2 times that Big Man Tings played it in mid, but I don't think that was a first pick in that instance. But first 2 bans on the side of the Valkyries, not just that Ola Run, they're also going to throw the other, I believe it's the Yoruban Pantheon is where they come through. Yamoja.
The what Pantheon?
I believe it's the Yoruba Pantheon.
That's where Yamoja's from?
I believe that's what that Pantheon name is.
Man, I thought she was Mayan. I'm gonna keep it a buck. I thought it was like her and Shibalanke hanging out.
No, it is her and Ola Run, actually. Same Pantheon. Those 2 do get banned away here. Sun Wukong and Erlong Shen, though, on the other side for the Olympus Bolts, taking out some of that jungle carry that we've been seeing out of Erlong.
Yeah, Erlong Shen is just such an adaptable pick. You can go towards a complete hyper carry style play. Generally, you will see the Mannequin Scepter in that first slot, which will net you a lot of objective burn, gives you some of the strongest level 1 to level 2 ganks in the game. And if you are able to hit the ground running, you can keep running down that tree, pick up a serrated edge, go for attack speed, and just be a chainsaw. Or if you have a slower start with Erlong Shen, he is one of the few gods that can say, all right, well, I guess I'm an initiator now. I'm going to go tanky. I'm just going to look for these 9 turns blessings. So the Olympus Bolts, that's a pretty nice ban for them, just trying to limit and kind of restrict some of the more standard picks out of the jungle from the Valkyries.
We talk about a tanky initiator now taken off the table here. Odin from the Valkyries to eliminate one of those solo lane potentials and make sure to keep Haddix away from something that can lock down a lot of these Valkyries players. One more ban to the Bolts, and they're going to use that with the Nike. So a lot of focus on some of these frontliners, a little bit on some of the carries here as well. So both these teams really want to try and break open this meta a little bit more and kind of push back some of these gods, especially gods like Nike that have been just doing basically nothing but winning this weekend.
Hey, Nike is incredibly strong. I mean, the survivability, the backline disruption, the engage, all there for this god. I was very curious to see where the Valhalla Valkyries went with their first pick selection. Generally, they like to go towards something safe, something that's kind of plug and play and won't really disrupt a draft. They don't show their hand too early on. They don't go for maybe some of the picks that you'd associate with them, like Geb in the first slot or Terra or the Emojas of the world. Camazotz is something that I would argue should generally just be first pick because he is plug and play, but he's also incredibly meta. He's adaptable. He's got decent flex potential. That's not necessarily slated for the jungle. The Valkyries can be tossing it up a little bit. Could be in the soul lane. Could be elsewhere. Probably going to be in the soul lane or the jungle, though.
I mean, we did see, what, a 7-0-7 Camazotz out of Fine OK today. We saw like a 9-0-something Camazotz out of Yarkor just yesterday on the Leviathans. It seems that Camazotz has found a nice and comfortable home over there in the solo lane. And talking about gods that have started to kind of flex over towards that solo lane once again, Osiris picked up here by the Bolts to couple with Skanesh.
Yeah, the axe changes have really helped out Osiris a lot in the lane. Now his poke potential is a lot higher. He's got much better late game scaling. Once you pick up that Sundering axe, all of a sudden you're not just a tanky bot in the late game trying to find tether stuns. Sickle and Unravel become a much larger threat on the field. So I really do like this Osiris pick early on, and especially knowing who is likely to be piloting it. Haddix, the guy on your screen right now, he's got a nickname in the SPL, and that's Chaddix. He loves to run it down, loves to play these bully style picks in the short lane, and Osiris fits that MO.
And it does give them that little bit of flexibility too if you want to throw the Osiris in jungle over towards Lasper, or if you want to give that one over to Haddix himself. On the opposite side here, the Valkyries are going to lock in their dual lane, Geb and Izanami, as their first 2 picks right after the Camazotz, and it seems they're kind of going with that idea that you were preaching on earlier, just going with something safe, something you can just slot right in there.
Yeah, Geb is a little bit slower in the lane, so I'm happy to see them match it up with Izanami immediately. Had the Valkyries not gone for their Hunter selection in that 3rd slot, it is very likely that the Bolts would have banned out Iza, as she's one of the only Hunters in the game that really makes it easier for Geb to exist during the laning phase. Generally, when you lock in the Rock God, you completely cede a lane, but Izanami having piercing autos from level 1 to all the way till the end of the match means that you should be able to establish at least some semblance of lane pressure early on.
Gonna be honest here, Mifflin, with his Gilgamesh locked in by the Bolts, I'm not entirely sure which of these warriors is going to be going jungle, which one's going to be going solo lane. It seems that either of them can make their way over. I mean, Final K's shown us success on the Gilgamesh solo in recent times. Osiris has been kind of jumping his way up towards the solo lane. And then an Achilles ban, another warrior who's kind of been rising up as of recent times.
I am a vehement Gilgamesh solo hater. I don't think that God's got the best laning phase. I don't super love the scaling of a full tank Gilgamesh either. So I am going to hedge my bets and say it is likely we're going to have Gilgamesh in the jungle with Osiris in the solo lane. And with Ganesh already matching up as your front line, you've got a pretty steadfast front line on the side of the Olympus Bolts. You've got decent objective burn. Gilgamesh is very strong as an auto attacker on Gold Furies or Pyromancers early on, with Dharmic Pillars as well. Match him up with a Hunter. These neutral objectives are going to burn very fast.
Yeah, it seems that there's not a single carry that's going to be able to really get past this back line, or I should say this front line here, of the Olympus Bolts. Second ban comes through. It's going to be a tier ban. There are many players in this league still playing tier, but one of those does happen to be Ducky there on the Valkyries, and the Bolts are going to ban that one away. And look how narrow they've made this warrior god pool towards the solo lane. You think they're kind of forcing Ducky to maybe jump on a Guardian?
It could be. I don't really like a lot of Ducky's Guardian selections. Maybe he can go towards something like the Jing Chen and hold his own in the lane and just hope that the scaling of his team composition helps him out come later on. But without having seen the mid laner for the Valkyries just yet, we'll have to see how that draft starts to round itself out. There's still a couple of warriors that you could go towards. I don't know, like a Hercules, I suppose, if you want to try and find some cheeky plays early on.
I mean, I guess the Camazotz is there, so there could always be that option just in case. So maybe they're forcing the Camazotz to go into solo lane at this point.
There's potential for that. I'm not certain that there's enough in the warrior ban column for me to say that there's really nothing left for the Valkyries to take there. Camazotz solo, obviously something very adept, something we've seen throughout the months, throughout this season as well, that has been very successful. Okay. All right, you may have been right. If that's a Pele lock-in, Camazotz solo, you got Aphrodite in mid. It's a very aggressive style of composition in the mid 3v3. If this Pele does get locked in, you got to really hope that they hit the ground running and link up with this Aphrodite and kind of run amok in the enemy jungle early on, which is not something that I would say that the Valkyries have got a lot of experience playing around. Generally, it is kind of a slow early game to a stronger mid-game transition that the Valkyries have aimed for in the past. Okay, no, you were right. Camazotz solo, Fenrir, and Aphrodite going to be the core of your mid 3v3. Once Geb rotates out as well, there's decent kill potential, but taking a peek at what the other side has, that is probably going to be a Soul in mid. Soul's incredibly safe. She's got CC immunity, the ultimate. Disapparate going to help you out a lot against things like the Brutalize as well. I like the aggression. I like the confidence from the Valkyries. I'm just worried about the execution on field.
I mean, you're talking about, them typically playing a much slower earlier game. I mean, Aphrodite's not one that screams early game damage and early game, a whole lot there. Geb, as you talked about over in the dual lane, going to be a fairly slow start, and only kind of coupled there with the Izanami to at least bring a little bit of parity in that lane. But the Olympus Bolts, they go for a 10th pick Chiron to kind of round out their draft. And again, kind of where I'm on this Osiris Gilgamesh, where do they fall in place here? I'm not 100% sold that this is actually going to be Soul in the mid lane. I mean, we saw some big performances out of Barracuda in the past on this god too.
Yeah, you could have a lot of flex potential between Sol and Chiron. Both of them have similar levels of aggression throughout the early game, so I think you have to evaluate who lanes better with Ganesh, and then I'd probably give the slight edge to Chiron. The follow-up damage, the ability to clear out waves, probably going to help out a lot in the 2v2, so I am still leaning towards Sol in mid. Sol also a lot more survivable against this aggressive Fenrir in the jungle from the Valhalla Valkyries. This could be a slower paced game for both of these teams, but it's really up to the junglers to establish that pacing. They're the really only cores of aggression on both of these squads. Likely the Gilgamesh for the Bolts. Gonna try and jam it down early on. Dropkick at level 2 has one of the most consistent and longest CCs, although single target. And, you know, Fenrir is Fenrir. He's gonna probably max out that third ability and try and hit the ground running.
And if we're looking at these two compositions kind of in a vacuum, is going up towards the late game that you say, you know, that these two teams might want to run it through here, at least for the Valkyries. Does the Valkyries composition scale better for them towards the late game, or are you kind of giving that edge over to the Bolts?
Double Hunter composition, one physical, one magical for the Bolts. Pretty hard to argue against that scaling, right? I mean, structures, neutral objectives, all going to burn incredibly quickly, and then you've got a standard King protection style of composition with a triple front line. But on the other side, Aphrodite plus Izanami, Geb being one of the best late-game Guardians in the game, Camazotz has very strong chase-down potential. I think that if this game does go to about the 30-minute mark at even, I'm not heavily favoring one side or the other, but I would likely give the slight edge to the Olympus Bolts. So if we're not going to give a massive advantage in the late game, one team likely does have an advantage throughout the early, and I've got to give that edge to the Bolts as well. Just because of the Aphrodite and the Geb really slowing down your mid 3v3, it's going to make it hard for this Fenrir to operate.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at these two teams here. I'm looking at one side that's got an Aphrodite. You've got a Camazotz with a lot of self-sustain. Fenrir's got some in his kit. Looking at the tools over towards the Olympus Bolts and the applications of maybe some kind of anti-heal. You got the Osiris with his guaranteed 100% in the ultimate. How much anti-heal do you think this team needs besides just that Osiris to try and deal with the Valks?
You could go towards an Ankh. It's pretty hard to argue against it, right? Ankh also pretty good in a health shield, so Stone Shield going to lose a little bit of value from that relic. Or you could just have Gilgamesh build a Brawler's Beat Stick, wins a Shamash, a great applicator of that passive. Chiron as well can maybe pick up a Toxic Blade if you're really concerned with the sustain from the Valkyries. I think that the Bolts have got plenty of avenues ahead of them to deal with some of the sustain from the other side.
We are going to throw to a very brief break as we get these teams set up and get them going into the games. We'll be back in just a few minutes with the start of game number 1. Hello and welcome back here to our first game of the second set of the Smite World Championship placements between the Bolts and the Valkyries. Teams are just getting the lobbies remain, getting things set up to jump in to game number 1. And a final look at the drafts and the rosters here before we jump into game, Mifflin. Any one way that you're kind of leaning particularly here for game number 1?
Yeah, so earlier I said I like the early game of the Olympus Bolts, and I like the late game of the Olympus Bolts. So what's the only portion of the game I haven't evaluated? It's the mid game. And I like that for the Olympus Bolts.
Looking pretty Olympus Bolts heavy there for this team. I mean, you got a pretty staunch front line here with Ganesh, Osiris, Gilgamesh. Seems they can do a lot to kind of protect these two carries in Sol, Chiron. Very curious, at least for me, to kind of see where those 4 gods in particular line out. I don't think we're going to see Ganesh go anywhere kind of crazy. It's pretty much just the support role we're likely going to be seeing him drop.
I'm hoping. I'm really hoping that's the case. You may have cast or cursed us here, J-Mac. You know, this Bolts draft doesn't have a whole lot of peel potential. They've got great engage. Winds of Shamash, leap in for Gilgamesh to lock people down. Osiris going in with the tether. Even Gilgamesh dropping the Dharmic Pillars. But if the Valhalla Valkyries are able to get off to a roaring start throughout the early, the peel potential of the Bolts isn't exactly there. So I'm expecting, or I would hope if you're a Valkyries fan, you probably hope this as well, that they get involved very early on. If they're able to leverage this Fenrir, have this Camazotz have a good start, create the space for Geb and Aphrodite to start hitting those scaling marks, that could be one way in for the Valhalla Valkyries. But the Valkyries are playing on a ping disadvantage, not going to mince words here. They're playing a very high execution draft in my mind. And the Olympus Bolts are playing with a ping advantage and a pretty low execution draft. So the Bolts have made ease of play in their favor.
And that seems to kind of been the trend throughout most of the Pro League regular season itself was you're playing on a higher ping, you want to make sure that you get something a little bit lower off here. But we'll see if the Valhalla Valkyries can do it here in game number 1. They're up against the Olympus Bolts. We got Gormizer and Aggro standing by for game number 1.
Aggro and the Valkyries up against the Bolts. It's going to be an interesting one to see how they take this on, Aggro. Ice, of course, is maybe the easiest topic of conversation throughout this game, strictly because he's kind of the wild card for this one, right? I mean, you come into this game, we've seen a lot of Johnny, we've seen a lot of good from Johnny this year, but without him playing, that's going to change a lot of what we expect out of the Valkyries.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Ice been playing at that SEC level basically during this entire year and just has not looked like that same type of carry player that he was back in his SPL days. But you know, maybe a change of environment's good for them and also good for the Valkyries players because sometimes, you know, especially when you've had a year like the Valkyries have had where, look, it's been really tough, obviously. Even though Johnny has been their best player, having someone else there and maybe bringing some new energy could be a good thing for them.
And it'll be fun to watch to see how they adapt to it, but what we saw, or at least heard from Mifflin, and realistically is maybe the biggest problem that the Valkyries are going to have to face is he liked the early game for the Bolts, the late game for the Bolts, and the mid game for the Bolts. So, you know, there's not a lot of wiggle room in there. There's the early to mid transition and that mid to late transition, I guess, technically. But, yeah, no, that's slicing things up too much. It's going to be a struggle here for the Valkyries.
I think so, too. I mean, the Bolts have come in with a really cohesive game plan with what they want to do. They've got really solid AoE between the Gilgamesh and the Ganesh, and then you've got Soul Ultimate as well that's going to help you out there. Venenu, even though he's playing a Hunter, he's playing a Hunter with better teamfight AoE than most in that role. So I think that their composition can work out really well in conjunction with one another. And having that Ganesh up against things like Fenrir that want to get their damage off over a longer period of time and brutalize never feels particularly good.
I also think it's worth mentioning because there was some conversation about Gilgamesh in the jungle versus solo, Osiris in the jungle versus solo, and Gilgamesh, Mifflin had said he likes more in the jungle, so it makes sense that that's exactly what we're going to see. Chiron was the other topic of that conversation. And I will say, it should not be a surprise whatsoever that it has gone into the mid, only because when we've seen this in the past, Venenu just loves Chiron, so he likes to pick it when he can.
And it's not only that, it's that Bera also loves Soul at the exact same time. So you've got two guys who want to be playing those types of gods, and I think both of them work really well with where they play them. Chiron has that control in mid, lets you fight a little bit better than Soul does at times.
Yeah.
Soul, once you get that passive stacked up, is really, really good at fighting in that 2v2, but Chiron is going to have some pretty easy kill potential. Though I did notice that Ven went Death Toll instead of Bluestone, which is what I would expect there for the Chiron, just helping out that ability wave clear. But Death Toll going to make him a little bit more sturdy, give him that ability to sustain through that lane a little bit more and not have to worry so much about that poke damage.
And that's the thing that's on the other side, right? You have a decent disengage, right, with your dash.
Yep.
You have a good jungler that can peel for you in the Gilgamesh, but you are still up against a regular mage and a Fenrir on the other side. You still have to be a little careful in a lot of these. With the Death Toll, specifically like the sustain, is that going to be enough to kind of keep him floating, or does he really need to still be cautious in these first few levels?
Yeah, I mean, Fenrir will kind of 100 to 0 you at level 2, so you have to be worried about that basically no matter what you go. But after that, Aphrodite is not a poke-centric character. You know, they're very all-in. So it's more about him being able to stay out as long as possible, get as much farm as he can in my mind, so that way he can hit those really key power spikes. A little bit unlucky for him in my mind that you go Chiron into the Aphrodite, because one of Chiron's strengths in mid is that you can just charge down most mid laners and they don't have a lot of options in order to get you off of them. But with Aphrodite having Kiss and back off, both of those will cancel the giddy up dash, make it so that she doesn't get knocked back. Both of those are on cooldown. Chiron's all in is super strong, but if Aphrodite doesn't have 2 out of her 3 abilities, then of course she's going to be pretty weak.
And we saw Camazot's, Geb and the Aphrodite, like all 3 of those, it feels to me, if you can get to that late game, you get 25 minutes in, should feel pretty good.
Yeah.
But, Geb's so slow. Aphro, like you said, not a lot of poke, and like can clear and hold her own, but realistically, I'm not expecting like the pressure to be in the mid lane. It feels like it's kind of Ducky and Ice really driving the show forward for the Valkyries.
It has to be, but the concern that I have, Gore, is that when we get to this late game team fight, you think it's going to be very, very strong for them. At the end of the day, I don't know how they get their damage off. Like, Fenrir damage in the late game is difficult to get off. Aphrodite damage in the late game, really more of a heal tool.
I
not
can hit
really
back
there.
off occasionally.
Right, like that's kind of all you have. Camazot's solo, yes, it puts pressure on backline, but it doesn't 100 to 0 people, particularly out of the solo lane. So all those things together, to me, Emilito's got to do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to this team fight. And I'm sure the Bolts recognize that exact same thing, and then are just going to be able to all in Emilito and make their team fight a lot easier come late game. Sure, the Afro and the Kama and the Fenrir, they might live for a long time, but they have to kill you at some point in order to win the game, and I'm worried about that aspect of it for the Valks.
Well, the good news is that I think you can rely a little bit on Emilito. Again, this year maybe hasn't been exactly what you want, but he is one of the original back-to-back world champions. Maybe not reigning, but we can see, I think a lot of that tenure has showcased for the Valkyries in certain circumstances. The problem has been, and we talked about this, the beginning of the year, it's all Johnny. In Phase 3, it's kind of all Johnny. A little bit more Ducky, I want to say, in Phase 3 as well. But in the middle, they did this weird style switch where it was kind of something like you would expect with Ice, making Johnny more of a facilitator and try to see what he can do to set somebody else up. And nobody did step up. There wasn't really that, okay, Johnny, you don't get any kills. We'll get the rest of them to Zeros and Immel. Zeros and Immel never got the kills, so nobody got kills in those sets.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I mean, the maturation of this Valkyries team, we've kind of been waiting for it. You hope that during this time they've been able to put together a cohesive game plan for how they want to be playing these types of sets. But until we see it from the Valkyries, we'll see what ends up happening. Maybe at this tournament they've got it figured out.
Well, they've already got good damage on Dabera. They're being able to chase him down a little bit. Look, Izanami gives up pressure and balances out, and one more hit is all it needs. Immel trying to find it instead turns towards Jake. And that one little swap is going to create things so much open. In fact, it gives Bolts the first blood over in mid lane. Bera still rolling, still fine. Raffer gets aggressive. That purple buff is nowhere near respawning, so the duo lane misses out, and the mid lane gets to scoop up. Plus, it goes to Vin. I'm sure he's happy about it.
Did Ven just 2v1 Ice and Zeros in mid? Like, Lasber doesn't have an assist. He wasn't there.
Yeah, you got a point.
Whenever the camera got there, so I don't know. I'm hoping we get a replay of that, because that something wild must have happened.
Good news.
We got it right away. Yeah, Ice just tries to damage check him, and Venenu wins the damage check. So Ice got there too early, because Zeros is still level 1. So that means the jungler got there too early.
I want to make a joke about it. Right now, though, Raffer's surrounded by 3, drop kicked back into the waiting arms of the Bolts duo lane. Bera's going to be able to pick that up, and now Immel's in a little bit of trouble. A good dash from Jake catches him, and there's not a lot of survivability. Stellar burst, almost enough damage, but Immel's still alive. that first blood really was like a damage check, and Vin just saying, all right, bet. Like, let's
Yeah.
see what happens.
All
And
right.
unfortunately, then you give a lot of free reign for Lasber to just go wherever he wants. And now you get a kill in the duo lane, maybe 2 if Emil continues trying to stay here. Stellar Burst is a lot, but he still manages to squeak out alive.
Yeah, that was a bit of a spicy start here for the Olympus Bolts, and when the dust settles, they're already up 1,000 gold at 2 minutes, which is suboptimal, I'd say, for the Valks. Also, this Zeros is probably just dead.
Yeah, you know, they're just chasing him. I'm trying
Yes.
to think of a lot
yes.
of ways to hype that one up. They walked into the jungle, they watched him take the red buff, and then they killed him anyway. So now they're going to back off, strip away the rest of the jungle away from the Valkyries. That 1,000 gold has now gone up a little bit closer to 1,300. But 2 minutes, now 3 minutes in. That is a hefty lead to go for. Ice goes for his speed buff steal, doesn't get the speed buff, and now he's isolated in a 1v1 against a jungler that has a lead on him. Lasbra chasing him down. No assistance so far from Haddix. He's hanging out in the lane, and Fenrir might just be fast enough, especially with his leap coming up soon, to just get out of here. Instead, he jumps back into the back Harpies, keeps himself engaged, drop kicked into the wall, and he gets killed.
Well, Haddix is low. Okay. This happened fast, Score.
Yeah.
We're 3 minutes in, huh?
That's about 2,000 gold, just about.
And that's where we are. I mean, Ice. What am I supposed to say in that moment? Huh,
He
Gore?
jumped wrong.
Right, he jumped wrong. And look, Venenu was cutting him off, going south. But make him hit you. You know, make him kill you. In that instance, instead he goes in and tries to get the back Harpies, which I don't remember if he got him. Maybe that's the right play if he gets the back Harpies in that moment. But certainly. Not the start the Valkyries were looking for. And also the sky is blue. Those are two equivalent statements, like obvious ones.
Just, yeah, you know what? Experience worth it if he was able to pick it up. Level 4, and he's keeping pace somewhat with Lasber. Lasber's a little bit ahead, just ticks over to 5. There's going to be the Dark Portal. Bara so low, but that's going to be great immunity. Manages to get out of there. Doesn't even have to burn the beads in the process either. And so that is twice now this duo lane has gotten Bara within 1 hit and not been able to watch him. Second verse, potentially same as the first. Ice once again caught out in the jungle. This time it's Vin and Haddix that are going for it. Ult out by Vin, shots off the mark, all 3 of them. And now it's going to be a bleed forward. Yeah, they just want this Fenrir dead. They get his ult, and they kill Ice one more time.
Yeah, but the mental damage that Ice has inflicted by juking all 3 shots from Venenu's ultimate.
Hey, look at it. That's the face of a man upset.
Yeah, he looks real angry right now, for sure.
But ignore the laugh.
Yeah, don't. It's one of the nervous laughs, you know, like when you know you messed up.
I can't believe I missed those.
Oops. Yeah, exactly. I mean, look. So far, the Valkyries have tried to play aggressively more on this right side of the map with Ice's presence, but they've been dominating left side. I mean, Raffer and Emilito have looked very strong in that 2v2, which says a lot about Izanami's strength in that type of moment, because you've got a Geb right next to you, and you're still dominating the lane that hard. I wouldn't be surprising if Lasber just heads on over to the left-hand side and gets Bara a nice little comfortable gank, sets him up for success.
You know, we got to talk about the bright sides. Right now, they've managed to rein what was approaching 2,000 back down a little bit closer to the 1,500, although with that Greater Scorpion, it helps the Bolts out a little bit more, bolstering that gold back in their favor. So what was an outrageous lead, 2 minutes, 3 minutes in, has actually slowly dissipated, not necessarily in favor now of the Valkyries, but at least something that is a little more manageable as we approach the 6-minute mark. Both of the Scorpions, though, going the way of the Bolts. A lot of the jungle has been going the way of the Bolts as well. I keep seeing pings, specifically from the Valkyries, on that back right Harpy. And I know Ice wants them. It feels like a weird obsession to me. But at this point, any farm is something he needs.
Yeah, I mean, this is the tough position that you can be in whenever your side lanes are doing well, both side lanes doing well so far for the Valkyries, but your mid lane is falling apart a little bit. You're going to start to, that pressure in mid is much easier to transition out to the side lanes than it is the opposite way around. So with that in mind, the Valkyries are going to have to probably make a choice. Which side lane do we want to defend in this type of moment? And where do we want to put our eggs? Because the Bolts are going to start to shut down one of these side lanes eventually through this mid pressure. It's a matter of which one.
Ice gets aggressive onto Haddix. Immediately has to fall back. Doesn't get the stun, doesn't get the leap he wants. And so that fight doesn't start out the way they wanted. I wish I had mentioned this when it was immediately relevant. Still somewhat relevant, though. And that is only remarked by the fact that Ice 0-3-0, first blood in this game, is tied for as one of the 2 players who has been first blooded the most in Worlds Finals. Which I have to give him credit, because that means he's made it to Worlds Finals enough times to have a record like that. But it's definitely something I'm starting to notice a trend here, at least when it comes to World Championship now qualifiers for him. We'll see if they're able to get back on track here. Has finished the Jotuns. I mean, a couple of items. You can see the gold really paying off for Lasbro right now, especially with now his passive being picked up and that item, that quest, getting scooped up. But the gold's starting to really showcase itself in some of the items for the Bolts.
Definitely in a good position. And as Mifflin said on the desk, you know, you like their odds heading into the mid game as it is. You think their composition would likely be a little bit stronger. So to give them an item advantage heading into that portion of the game is going to be difficult for the Valkyries to contest.
Well, Raffer locked up. There's Dharmic Pillars. There's a Silence. Good luck trying to get away here. The healing is going to be good. The shield a little bit better, and it might be enough to get him out of here. Lasbra on the chase. One more hit is all it takes, but CC immunity and rollout gets Raffer on out of there. Not far enough, though, as Lasbra continues the chase. Meanwhile, Ice goes down in mid one more time. The Bolts are up 7-0.
I mean, even with Ice picking up a target that doesn't have any purification beads, the Valkyries just don't have enough damage. They brought Jake in underneath that tier 1 tower, and that upgraded meditation is doing too much work.
Immel,
Goodbye.
not stunned out, not locked down. Still dead, though, and that's all that matters. Hey, didn't have to use the beads. Didn't really have a lot of chance to use anything there. Good damage combo from the Bolts. They get 8 kills now, 8.5 minutes in. If they keep up this pace, they can keep up a 1 kill a minute. That has to slow down eventually.
Eventually, but maybe only because the game would end.
Or death timers.
Yeah, or death timers, right? Yeah, but a deicide puts you 5 up. You know what I mean? Like that's a lot of extra kills in the bank that you don't have to worry about keeping up with. I mean, the Valkyries, like I said, they have to try and play around one of these side lanes, and as expected, Lasbra just goes over to the left-hand side, helps out with an easy kill, though Barra could have potentially had Emilito all by himself with that type of positioning. And now, you know, Ducky's starting to lose pressure, gets his blue buff defended in the 2v1, but still has to try and defend in the 2v1. This is clinical for the Bolts.
Now Lasbra making another trip back to the duo lane. 1 level up on Immel. He gets the leap, the drop kick. And now he's just waiting. Winds of Shamash not available. Ice comes in, gets the grab, but the tower's not going to reset. Instead, it's going to be Barra getting the kill. Lasbra does go down. First kill online for the Valkyries, and Ice is able to get that. Now they're chasing down Barracuda in the long lane. He has no mana to work with. Brutalize gets the damage. 1 more hit. They get the 2nd kill, and Ice gets 2.
Well done there from Ice to catch up, and Raffer sets him up nicely with that knock-up, forces the beats for Barra, but still able to keep him locked in set up for that kill. So 2 big kills there for Ice. Get some nice shutdowns. Both members were 3-0 at the time, and that means that he's going to be in a good spot.
Zeros getting bullied a little bit. There's the slow, there's the shots, there's the root. Pretty much everything you could ask. And a combo from your mid support. And Vin gets credit. 4-0-2 now for the Chiron. They're going up now a little over that 2,000 gold mark, making it, what, 2,500? As they have now. Gold Fury on the table over there in the left-hand side. Pyromancer spawned up. The Bolts are trying to speedrun this, but they haven't got as much map pressure all around as I would have expected.
No, I mean, every tower is still standing, though Ice's tower over there on the left tier 1 is at its true last breath.
It is technically standing by the lowest margins.
Alive, at the very least. You say what you will, but you have to admit that tower is still up. At least for the time being. The Bolts getting a nice neutral objective there from Pyro.
There's a knock-up onto Barra. Barra has spent a lot of time close to dead this game. Only has died once. This time around doesn't seem too worried. Has a level up on Immel, 2 levels up on Raffer. And of course the cavalry coming to help him out. Jake, Lasbra in the jungle, and Immel has nowhere to go. Dark Portal thrown out. He's trying to get the kill onto Barra before he goes down, but he's not going to be able to find it. Good body blocks, and of course good jukes from Barra and Lasbra. Make sure that one's a lot easier. Raffer makes it out alive. The rest of the Valkyries are just trying to secure their own jungle.
I like that play, though, from Emilito. I mean, he's dead. If he's going to commit to that tower, he's gone. And the way that he used his dash earlier, he's probably dead no matter what. So may as well try and commit to get as much as I can out of it. Nearly got Barra, forced Lasbra's ultimate. Well done.
Well, Raffer, stunned out, locked down. Couldn't get close to the Gold Fury. Now might just die for it. It's 11 kills, 12 kills in 11.5 minutes, plus the Gold Fury on top. The Bolts extend their lead to 4,000 gold. And they're going to be feeling comfortable. The towers, again, actually better off for the Valkyries right now because they were able to knock one down. But it feels like it's only a matter of time, especially with this gold lead. Now you can see the items getting purchased from the bolts. They're going to hit big power spikes.
Very big power spikes. Spear of the Magus for Barracuda, which is an item that basically brought this character back into the meta nearly single-handedly.
Well, there's that interaction you had mentioned, the Ohm canceling out the Brutalize. Still enough damage. Ragnarok came through, isolated Jake. Jake runs to the waiting arms of Barracuda, and that should be enough to peel away Ice Ice. Drops the Stellar Burst and the Supernova, and at least is able to get a huge amount of peel. Vin rotates in. Immel caught between three. I don't know if this is the fight he wants. Good Dark Portal, but not able to turn around to kill. Ice Ice goes in, Brutalize onto Jake, goes for the kill, gets the kill, but might cost him his life. Tries to run away. There's no chance for that one between the two carries of the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah, Ice Ice's life for Jake's not super worth it there for Ice Ice, I'd say. I think you just kind of take the loss on the 2-for-1 or the 1-for-0 instead of giving them the 2-for-1 in that scenario. But, you know, Ice Ice still racking up the kills, at the very least. You have to give him that. He's 3-5, has all 3 kills so far for the Valhalla Valkyries, and maybe with that extra gold that he gets from that kill, he can turn himself into a win condition.
And I got to give him lots of credit because he was 0-4 before he was 3-5. So it has been a pretty large change from the jungle, at least in terms of presence and where he's getting those kills. Granted, that last one, diving all in for Jake, maybe up in the air about the conversation if that 1-for-1 is going to be worthwhile. Any kill at this point is probably worth it, considering Jake, level 12, is ahead of the entire dual lane for the Valkyries, just barely trailing the jungle and mid lane for the Valkyries. So that's going to be something to keep your eyes on, the level and the experience for awesome Jake. But it is a 4-0-5 Chiron, a 5-1-5 Gilgamesh, and of course the 5-1-1 Soul that the Bolts have. I feel like they're doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, they're doing a lot, and they're kind of just leaving Haddix over here as the ducky manager, is what I'm going to call him.
Keep him away from us.
Yeah, you just keep him here, and we will win elsewhere. And clearly that's been the plan for the Bolts, just based on their bans alone.
Well, there's Zeros' ult forced out thanks to Jake.
Big win.
Tower pressure is still there. Yeah, not only do they get the ult, they get the tower, and now they're going to be able to circle around. Poor Ice Ice goes into the ult, beads immediately by Lasbra. And instead of having that CC immunity, now has to use his leaps to get away. Good bling from Lasbra, closes the gap. Ice Ice one more hit, and that's all it'll take. Lasbra puts himself up at 6-1-5. Now the chase is on. Raffer caught out, shield used, but he's not going to be able to do much. Rollout slowed down thanks to the Ohm, but it's not going to be able to find enough damage to lock down the tank. And the Bolts have rotated everyone onto this side of the map. The only thing available over here is Fire Giant, and I don't think they're going for it just yet.
No, probably not yet. I mean, Venenu has gone a pretty unique build here on the Chiron, I'd say, going Heartseeker third, which I really don't mind. I mean, it's a ton of power. It gives him some mana, which you probably needed, not going for Transcendence or Jotuns early. You know, probably wanted a little bit more mana sustain. Heartseeker gives you that. Percent pen, a passive that you can apply 4 times because all 4 of your abilities do damage. I'm a big fan of Heartseeker on Chiron. Normally wouldn't see it this early on, but I think with the pace of this game, he may not have a chance to build 5 items at this point because they're dominating so hard.
Yeah, they do be winning right now, and that's the best way to describe it. 7,000 gold, 15.5 minutes in. Now they're putting pressure on the right-hand tier 2. Ice Ice grabs Jake. Ice Ice takes a lot of damage in the process. Jake juking around, dodges out the Camazot's ult, and Ducky has to fall back to the Phoenix. Ice Ice has fallen down. Emilito shortly falling there after.
Nice
Great
Aegis.
keeps him alive, but
Doesn't
Haddix
matter.
still gets the kill under the right-hand Phoenix. Now in the 1v1 with him and Ducky. Doesn't want to dive the Phoenix this time, but it doesn't matter. He's got the rest of the team coming up. Winds of Shamash dropped, slowing down Rapper. He's got a lot of health to whittle through, though, and the Bolts don't have a lot to work with. They're going to fall back. Zeros rotating in, and the healer showing up to push the Bolts back.
I mean, Ducky doesn't have his beads or his ultimate, but now with Zeros linked up, has plenty of sustain, and there is no anti-heal, really, on the other side from the Olympus Bolts. It is crazy. I knew that I was like, surely Venenu should be building something instead of Heartseeker. No brawlers for him. Lasbra's just now working towards brawlers, unless that's a Crusher, which I suppose it could be, but it shouldn't be. No Divine from Barracuda, which just recently got buffed and feels really good on basically everybody. Definitely a lack of anti-heal here for the Olympus Bolts. No Cursed Ankh either. Bit of almost a disrespectful amount of lack of anti-heal from the Bolts. And they could be right. They're far enough ahead right now that they could just DPS race of full heal from an Aphrodite, and it won't matter. But if this game gets stalled out, and now the Bolts don't have an Onk, they don't have this requisite anti-heal that they need, it could get a little bit ugly for them.
Well, good news. Well, actually, a couple of good news. I will say Brawlers, Toxic Blade, Haddix, and Lasbra, so a little bit of anti-heal. And then good news for the Valkyries, they're able to get a Primal Fury. Fire Giant started up, half health already here for the Bolts. 17 minutes, 17 seconds in. Raffer goes in, Raffer wants to steal, Raffer gets killed off in the process, and the Bolts get the Fire Giant. Now they're going to chase down. Zeros barely alive, uses the ult, and Haddix is trying to get the chase. Great Aegis keeps Zeros in this game for now. Make sure that he stays alive. The healing's going to be there. The mana is not. He's still going to have to forfeit this tower. And right now, it's Immel trying to split push the left-hand Phoenix that is maybe the big opener for the Valkyries.
Lasbra's there to defend, so make sure that left side Phoenix won't go down. And now if he can keep Emilito from backing, that could potentially open a window for the Bolts. But instead of pushing, they want to pad that kill total a little bit. Make sure that Emilito doesn't get away for free.
Now, no towers left for the Valkyries. Immel with a great play of I'm going to turn invisible and then just stand still. You can't guess where I try to go. Haddix is low. Ice trying to chase him. Lord of the Afterlife in conjunction with Barracuda gets enough damage and kills off the jungler. Ducky gets out of there. Blink used, disengage is clean, and Immel manages to stay up on the left-hand side. Minion wave coming with him soon. He's going to get some pressure onto that Phoenix. Mid-Phoenix, though, is getting pressured for the Valhalla Valkyries, and it is gone before you could guess it. Now they're walking into the Titan room. 18 minutes, 30 seconds, and they're starting this off. Cataclysm stuns out Haddix, but isn't enough to lock him down and get the kill. Wins the Shamash, dropped out, and Ducky's getting chased down for the kill. Damage onto the Bolts is actually going to be enough to push them out of the room. Meanwhile, Immel got himself a Phoenix.
Yeah, that's a big play there from Emilito. Just the obviously the standstill after the stealth, jukes out Lasbra, and then just heads right on back. That ranked split push style of stubbornness in pushing on that left-hand side, but it ends up really paying off for him. I don't think Emilito being in mid stops the Bolts from getting that Phoenix. I mean, they cut through that so easily with the upgraded Frenzy, with the Soul, with the Chiron, the Shoguns there from Jake. So may as well just get ourselves an objective, and it's a darn good one. Now if the Bolts misplay their map macro, which I think has been at times a weak point for this team, the Valkyries have an opportunity to win the game.
And it's actually wild, because you had mentioned it. With the amount of anti-heal that was lacking, now Contagion picked up another Brawlers on the side of the Bolts, so they do have a couple more items helping them out there. But, I mean, Geb Shield, Zeros with the heal and the save. And some of these fights, if you get Immel split pushing like that, they get that amount of pressure anywhere on this map. He's just creating win conditions. It could be one of the rare instances. I mean, it's 11,000 gold separating them. It's, what is that, 16 kills between the two of them. But admittedly, that is a nice opening for the Valkyries, because sometimes all you need is one fight. This is going to be one of those cases.
Wasn't the Scarabs backdoor against the Bolts whenever they were down like 10K and then they just went for...
They've done it twice, because I think they did it to the Warriors as well a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, so, I mean, hey, we've seen teams do it. The Valkyries, if they could find a way to try and keep some people busy and let Emilito and Zero, something like that, try and go end the game, it's possible, and by far their easiest way to win the game.
Well, now they have to be a little more careful. There's the Darvik Pillars. Phoenix on the left-hand side is where the aggression is getting thrown. It's Ice who goes down. Good shot from Venenu. Make sure to lock up that kill. Phoenix ends up getting burned down. The chase is there. Zeros has to run back. You're not getting healed, buddy. You have the Lord of the Afterlife passive on you, but he's going to be able to get into the fountain, get healed up, get right back into this fight. Ducky as well, chasing down Vin. Not able to get the kill. Finally locks him down, but it costs him his life. Zeros, Immel, Raffer. That's all that's standing. A 3v4 under the Titan room as the Bolts run forward. They're taking the damage necessary, and they're throwing it exactly where it needs to go. The raid boss is the target, and they're going to be able to win this game 21 minutes in.
Make it look nice and easy as well. I mean, it started out with Venenu with that 2v1 in mid, and it didn't get a whole lot better from there for the Valkyries. A couple of kills there in the sequence for Ice, but ultimately the Bolts just controlled that early game, controlled the mid game, and we didn't really get to the late game because the Bolts prevented that.
But something, sneaking suspicion, 11,000 gold in their favor, probably control a little bit of the late game.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, the healing was definitely starting to show itself towards the end of the game there, but you could see happiness in the booth for the boys. Barra cheekily smiled over. I don't know which player he was looking at, if it was Vin, Lasbra, or Haddix, but he just stared him down and went, yeah. That was us. I mean, it's a good start for them, right? You want to be up 1-0. Again, 2 wins in a set or 2 set wins is what it takes to get to Worlds. Winner of this goes up against the Dragons, but you're one step closer to being able to get there.
And we know the Bolts are capable of being one of the best teams in this league. So if they continue to take care of business, I expect this set to look a lot like that.
Yeah, well, they take game number 1 in a very convincing fashion. We'll see if they can do that in games 2 and 3, or if the Valks have something to fight back right after this.
Hey, girl, I saw you sitting wrong, but don't be wasting time. I wanna see your smile. Hey, you wanna go with me? I'll be your fantasy. Let's do this secretly. And if you stay the night, yeah, if I do alright, you might be coming back for more. And if you're coming back, we must be on the right track, and I'm stepping up for sure. If it's alright with you, I'll book a table for two at this fancy restaurant. And if you still want me, I'll make sure to be the best you ever had. If I was your man, I'd be the best you ever had. If I was your man, I'd be the best you ever saw, the best you ever had. And we would be as happy as can be.
Hey there, Smite fans, Aggro here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. An AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
Plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true. I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
And what's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240 Hz monitors.
Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality.
We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the Smite Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible Smite experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's at Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com. I know Mike didn't say the thing. Mike, can you say the thing for him?
You're telling me an alien wore this?
Hello and welcome back, everybody. Getting ready to go into game number 2 between the Olympus Bolts and the Valhalla Valkyries. Before we do that, a shout out to our title sponsor here of the Season 8 of the SPL in Alienware. Make sure to go to smitegame.com/Alienware. Use code SMITEAW to check up all the specs and everything else available to you guys over from Alienware. The Aurora Ryzen 10 desktop, the 25-inch 240 Hz gaming monitor, all that and more can be yours going over to smitegame.com/Alienware. Thank you so much to Alienware for being the sponsor of Season 8 of the SPL. Check them out on their social media at Alienware on Twitter and Instagram, and go to alienwarearena.com. J-Mac and Mifflin here to get ready to go into game number 2. Before we went into game number 1, you said you liked the Olympus Bolts draft in early, mid, and late. And, well, early, mid, and late, well, I don't even know if we really got to late game there for the Olympus Bolts.
No, it wasn't necessary. An unnecessary portion of the game for the Olympus Bolts this time around. It just felt like the Valhalla Valkyries, of course, having some issues with their connection, but obviously that's not all there was there. It felt like the composition really did struggle to find points of contention for the Valhalla Valkyries. It just felt like the Olympus Bolts really were at every step of the way, being the proactive gamers. They were forcing fights whenever they wanted. They were controlling buffs. They were the ones at the objectives first. But that's not to say that the Valhalla Valkyries were not without fight back. There was nearly an opportunity around that first Fire Giant where I thought maybe Raffer would have been able to steal had he channeled that Cataclysm. There was a couple of objective calls from the Valhalla Valkyries that were incredibly intelligent, got them some Gold Furies, but at the end of the day, the slash lines at the top of your screen, now at 11 minutes, 10 and 2, I'm sure we'll get some a little bit later on. It gets a lot worse for the Valhalla Valkyries the longer this game goes on.
There were a couple of moments there where there was some of that fight back, like you said, around Fire Giant. Dual lane, Ice was able to pick up a couple of kills of his own on this Fenrir with the help of some of his team. Constantly keeping pressure on Barracuda and Jake over on that dual lane. I mean, the Valhalla Valkyries were good at least subduing some of the damage that could have been done there from the Bolts in the early stages of the game. But at the end of it all, it is the Bolts who come out on top. A 7-1-5 out of Barracuda and a 7-1-7 out of Lazara. And Haddix, with getting 2 of those kills, will now officially bump himself over that 500 competitive kill mark. So congratulations, Haddix, on your 500th kill.
And you know what? I got to give some respect to Ice. I know the KD doesn't look super great. I believe it was 3-9 at the end of that game, but that's kind of a byproduct of trying to get things done in the jungle. It's something that Aggro had lightly touched on during the cast, saying that, well, maybe that trade's not super valuable, but he's at least getting a couple of kills. When your entire team is behind, the jungler has to go for these crazy, outlandish plays to try and kind of revitalize some of these lanes, and Ice was not straying away from it. He wasn't worried about tarnishing his KDA. He got involved consistently, and, well, he netted his team like 70% of his kills, so gotta put some respect on the jungler's name.
I mean, kind of seeing some signs of Johnny out there, where Johnny would do something similar, even if he's going, 0-12 on an Apollo, or if he's going 12-0 on an Uller, he's out there doing everything that he can to try and get that team through. Picks and bans for game number 2, though. Let's jump right in those. We saw a lot of targeted bans towards the solo lane in particular, a lot of warrior bans, and then a couple of those guardian bans, specifically the Umoja. Do you imagine here in game 2, Mifflin, any of those things are going to change out here?
No, not particularly. I think the Valks might shift up some of their bans to target out what the Bolts were playing in game 1, but the Bolts themselves, no changes required. I got no notes. I got to walk by the coach booth. Ro was sitting in there. I'd never seen a larger smile on a coach's face in my life, man. That guy was so happy watching game 1. So you got to think he walks into the booth and says, hey, more of that, please. And I'm sure the Bolts are very willing to do exactly that.
Go with it again, if you so please. The Bolts will make one adaptation.
God, look at him,
in
he's
their
so
bans,
happy.
And it will be the Fenrir taking away. He does have a pretty big smile on his face.
He is cheesing.
He is beaming ear to ear. He is just happy to be here, happy to see the Bolts succeeding here in this first game. We'll see if they can do it again in game number 2. Same bans out of the Valkyries this time around with that Oleron, Umoja, and Odin. It will be a Camazot's first pick yet again, but this time a quick change up from the Bolts. They're going to go with a Hercules first pick.
All right, seems like we're smiling and having some fun on the side of the Olympus Bolts. I had brought up Hercules in the first game's P's and B's, and that was for the Valhalla Valkyries when they were down like 6 gods banned away from the soul lane. This time, Hercules in that first pick selection. Very interesting. I would be doing a disservice if I didn't bring up Hercules' flex potential. Historically, we've seen him see success in 3 separate roles. That's solo, jungle, and support. We've seen ESET have success in exactly 2 roles. That's, well, 3, rather, if we want to count the SCC. That's mid, support, and jungle. So some flex potential for the Olympus Bolts with their top 2 selections, but what have they got for themselves? Well, regardless of where those 2 gods land, they've got phenomenal objective burn. They've got great displacement. They've got great survivability as well. Hercules, probably one of the most effectively tanky gods in the game. ESET, going to give you a large deal of damage mitigation as well. The Olympus Bolts have got a pretty steadfast god lineup here.
Hoyi Sobek for the next 2 picks out of the Valhalla Valkyries. Ben, remember the days when Hercules had like 110% return on his mitigate wounds for the healing, and it's been drastically nerfed since those times, but I can only imagine how awful it would be to go through here. You see Barracuda reclining back in that maxonomic chair. He is living comfortably as the rest of the Bolts were after that game. And now we get to see one of the first professional games here. We saw it out of the Leviathans. Now we get to see it here in the Bolts. Kleena makes her way onto the Bolts roster.
I'm sorry, J-Mac. I wasn't listening. I was just admiring the range of motion these phenomenal
They go
beasts
so
of
far
chairs
back,
have
man.
got. These Maxonomics, you can't do much better than it. To quote Dolson's mother, because Dolson isn't here, it's Maxonomic for your rear, and it's Alienware for your gear. You got to be running that every single time. I think you said something about Kleena, so I'm going to go ahead and try and evaluate that slightly. Kleena brings a lot of damage, and I don't think you need any CC from your jungler from the Bolts draft already. Hercules with a driving strike, as well as the Spirit Ball from ESET, even the Silence as well. You've already got your CC core on the Olympus Bolt, so that does open up the door to having Kleena in the jungle, a god that brings damage, a little bit more damage, as well as objective burn potential. So now the Bolts have got themselves great secure, great burn, decent early game. If this ESET is going towards mid, that's a very high pressure god. Hercules should be able to maintain pressure in whatever lane he lands himself in. Kleena has got very fast scaling out of the jungle. Seems like the Olympus Bolts are trying to match the pace or beat what we saw in game 1.
Izanami Terra from the Valkyries are their bans. The Bolts get rid of a couple of junglers in Hunbats and Loki. So 3, well, technically 4, I guess, with Erlong Shen, targeted jungle bans. And then with their jungle pick, that's going to make the Valks really have to dip down. Ice going to have to dig into that God pool a little bit here. Or maybe that Camazotz could just slot to him. That's kind of that power that the flexibility has with that god. But a Medusa for the Bolts. We saw some of those buffs come through. The Acid Spray is now the one that has the anti-heal. Lacerate hits those minions. You kind of talked a little bit about yesterday how Medusa's kind of climbed up your power ranks a bit.
Yeah, she's got a lot of pressure, great boxing potential as well. I'm expecting great things from Medusa. I'm expecting her to be a mainstay in the hunter role all the way through Worlds until this god sees some changes or maybe some other hunters or items shift up the meta there. This Bolts draft is a little wacky if that Baron Samedi gets locked in. Would make me think that it is ESET support, but I'm not super loving that. Now the Hell Hover makes me think it's going to be like Hercules support. All right. Thanks, guys. Just keep switching it up. I'll evaluate when you're done. No. Take your time, Olympus Bolts.
They're just playing roulette with the God Wheel right now. They've actually got the random God Wheel spinning at the moment, and wherever it lands is what they just kind of hover towards at this moment. But the Valks do have their roster fully lined out. It's the Camazotz, Houyi, Sobek, Tiamat, Kabrakan for their final 2. And to me, that still kind of leaves it up in the air where this Camazotz and this Kabrakan are going to be kind of landing out here. We have seen the Kabrakan kind of Talon Trinket start in the past, running through the solo lane. We've seen Kabrakan Jungle pop in a couple times as well.
Yeah, and who is the new coach for the Valhalla Valkyries? It's no one else besides Cherio, and he loves himself some Kabrakan Jungle. So if that is where this god finds itself, maybe that's some hints from the coach there, trying to shift things up. You know, the Bolts are messing with me, all right? I just want to know what this last pick is. Stop smiling, Barracuda, and lock in your god so I can talk about the entirety of your It's AMC.
It is AMC. It's another hunter.
Okay, so we got Hercules, solo, ESET support, Medusa mid, AMC in the hunter role. Kleena is going to go in that last role herself. Okay, got it.
The jungle.
I don't know. If you say so.
Well, I mean, the jungle's the only one that you didn't mention there.
Yeah,
so
look, man.
You
said it, not me.
So you're thinking Medusa mid, kind of some shies back to the old days of Yaman whenever he would play the Medusa mid, or maybe the AMC mid? Either one really doesn't matter. Is there one that you prefer to see this Medusa in between mid or ADC?
I would like to see Medusa in mid. I think that her pressure is going to be very nice there. AMC matches up very well with somebody that can help him in the lane. You kind of don't want to leave your AMC in mid because he's very immobile, especially up against what could be a Kabrakan in the jungle. Very easy for him to lock down that god. I actually really like this Valks draft, just top to bottom. I think it's a good composition. You've got great CC. You've got decent scaling in the late game. The initiation is going to be pretty easy to execute on, be it a pluck from Sobek or a Kabrakan wall to start off these fights. And the Valkyries have got themselves a much stronger early game as well. So they shouldn't have as many issues pre-10 minutes as we saw in Game 1.
So previously, we've only really been seeing this ESET support come out of Quig from the SCC. Now we get to see one of our first takes at a professional team bringing out this god into the support role, pairing up this ESET Amuzin Cobb lane, looking like a lot of pressure going up against the Houyi Sobek.
Yeah, it could be. And, you know, it could also be ESET in the solo. It could also be ESET mid. We just get like a double hunter lane. Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. The Olympus Bolts were having too much fun. I thought I was confident in my allocation of these gods, and then I looked at the player cams, and they were cheesing wildly. So, like, what am I supposed to do with that?
firmly place your stance and where you think they're going to go?
Nope. Here's the thing,
Okay.
J-Mac.
Okay.
I've got a little bit more tenure on the SPL desk than you.
Okay.
You
That is
gotta
true.
fence sit. This is the first piece of advice Aggro ever gave me. Well, actually, the first piece of advice Aggro ever gave me was me asking him what you're supposed to talk about on the desk, and he said, I'm not going to do your job for you. And then later on, he said, I'm going to give you one piece of advice, Mifflin. And as you always gotta waffle, you gotta fence sit. Don't make a definitive stance because then you open yourself up to criticism. So I won't.
Well, there you have it. Mifflin is not going to give a definitive stance on where any of these gods are going to go. I honestly can't give a definitive stance on where any of these gods are going to go because I've seen hunters go in solo lane too. So there we go. We got a lot of, we saw, what was it, like a Chiron, was it SOT or was it Haddix who played the Chiron solo? One of those two, I imagine, played it through. But it's game number 2 with the Valhalla Valkyries, the Olympus Bolts. Let's see where everything falls into place right here in game 2.
Now let's see what this Cupid shuffle comes out being. It's Hercules solo, E-sets.
No Cupid.
E-set, yeah, okay, there we go. Yeah, no Cupid. It's a song.
Can I say, by the way,
They play it at like parties.
That
Usually,
is
like it's a very like white person.
yeah, I
thing.
know what the Cupid Shuffle
Yeah,
is.
okay.
Score. Okay, yeah. That wasn't true. What?
Oh
what
yeah,
Mifflin
you
said
got to
about
defend
me.
yourself.
Yeah, I have to defend myself. I didn't tell him not to take a definitive stance.
You have told him you won't do his job for him.
I have told him that multiple times, and I suppose I don't recall that exact scenario, but I suppose I may have told Mifflin not to take a definitive stance, but it wasn't for any other reason that I don't want him to reveal how foolish he is in front of everyone. So in that sense, I suppose I could have potentially said that. Yeah.
Man, you should have watched yesterday.
Yeah.
'Cause that what you
I
just
was.
said was thrown out the window.
I was watching yesterday. It was something, wasn't it?
Well, hey, we've got ESET support. We actually have seen it. This is not. It sounds very nonplussed when I say it like that because we've seen it this week already. Of course, you get Bara. Lacerate no longer has that anti-heal. It's been moved over to the spit, so Medusa feels a little bit better.
And it goes through. It does damage to minions
Yes,
as you're going through,
there you
which is
go.
also a very big deal. Lets you to the wave, and then when they're at their last leg, just dash right through it, clear the wave, make sure that you don't pull minion aggro and start taking damage that way.
Now it's up to Lazarus. We get a good look at Kleena for one of the SPL junglers. A lot of damage there onto Zeros, but a lot returned there from Ice, and actually forces the beads out of Lazarus and forces him to fall back. Aggression right now, it has caught out Raffer. They do not have the stun yet available. I was waiting to see if Jake had that Spirit Ball, but it's not going to come through. That is not, by the way, a combo that connects in my mind. Awesome Jake and ESET.
No, that is not the typical type of God combination. But you know what? When you absolutely roll your opponents in the last game, you're allowed to pick basically whatever you want.
Yeah.
And the Olympus Bolts did the rolling, and therefore are allowed to pick things like ESET support. And you know, there's some argument to not showing picks like this whenever you're playing really well and don't feel like you need to, especially when this is the biggest tournament of the year, trying to qualify for the Smite World Championships. But it also, if this is a pick that you think is okay, but maybe wasn't in your final game plan for what you're going to do against these top-end teams, making them think about it, also not a bad idea.
Now it's going to be Jake who's getting pressured out. Emil jumps backwards, though, and is finding a lot of damage up against Bara, but no, it's turned around. Bara with a great Lacerate root and then a good Acid Spray manages to lock him down, and now the Mage Hunter combo throws some damage towards Raffer. He's going to stay alive, and it is almost an exact replay of what we got to see there in game number 1. Same first blood style, except they actually got the kill this time in the duo lane.
Yeah, don't want to let that one get away there. I mean, Raffer, again,
no.
in trouble. Has Charge Prey, won't use it because Jake had good body blocks and Barracuda's there putting out the damage. I agree with what Mifflin was saying, though, on the desk about Medusa. I think this god is really good right now. I'm a big fan of Medusa. I think she brings a lot when it comes to team fighting. You know, having an AoE ultimate as a hunter is fairly rare and feels really strong whenever you do get a chance to get your hands on it. And then her boxing potential in lane is always very, very strong. So Bara pulling out the Medusa and starting off 2-0, definitely indicative, I think, of this god's strength.
Yeah, it feels solid for the Bolts as well. I know they're probably happy, more than happy, about this start. I will admit, I was trying to manifest a Nox because I saw the draft, I saw how hard they were smiling, and I really wanted to be able to cross the last god off my list, aggro. But instead we get a really fun game where actually it is a genuine comp. And we saw a lot of this AMC mid yesterday. Dardez was loving to play it. it feels like even though it's not necessarily the meta we've been used to all year, this all has a really good home so far, at least at the end of Season 8.
Yeah, I mean, AMC, very strong. We saw him at Phase 3 playoffs in a little bit and on the lead up to the World Championship placement round. Think that he is very good and has always had a home in mid because he clears so well by himself. And having the shorter lane does him some good.
Lasbra, aggressive. Thinking something could happen there, but unfortunately for Lasbra, nothing's able to come to fruition. Ducky forced to use Bat Out of Hell to disengage. The Valkyries right now just trying to stay alive more than they are able to get on the aggressive. And that feels like this composition. I mean, I see Sobek. That can be a little bit early, but Tiamat, I'm not trying to fight. Kabrakan, maybe a little bit, but not necessarily. And then, of course, Gamazotz, I like, even though he's good now, I think can excel as time goes on in this game. And it feels like that's what the Valkyries want. Unfortunately, if the Bolts can continue at this pace, they're already up about 1,400 gold. They're going to be able to push that even further if they continue around this same rate.
And again, it's basically all located in one lane. Last time it was mid-jungle was really far behind for the Valkyries. Now it's duo lane that is going to be pretty substantially behind. And it's not as easy to transfer that to the entire map, but it is awfully easy for Bera and Jake to start to lean a little bit on mid, put some pressure on zeros, put some pressure on these red buffs, and start to open up the game that way. So, what is Ice-Ice's response? Is he going to come over to this right-hand side and try and set Haddox behind, set up a winning lane for the Valkyries? Is he exclusively on defense mode, trying to defend these reds and purples? Is he going to try and go on the offensive and mid? I mean, there are a couple options that he has.
Right now, it doesn't even seem like he wants to help out Ducky too much. Maybe that's just because Ducky is safe and feeling fine. So he's going to get a little bit of poke thrown his way as the Bolts are trying to make a run through the right-hand jungle. It hasn't been explosive. Vin is kind of floating around, keeping eyes on everybody. I didn't even realize it. My brain automatically ESET to be Venenu.
Yep.
Because mage mid makes sense. Instead, it's Jake who's roaming around the map. He gets a good silence and helps lock down Raffer, but not able to find the kill just yet. They still get the mid Harpies, and again, continue to excel and push themselves forward.
Yeah, I like the way Lazarus playing this clean now. I mean, just constantly in the wall, constantly using that scream for some poke. There trades out his ultimate in order to make sure he gets one of the oracles. I think that's a totally fine trade for him to be taking at this stage of the game.
And that Veil, honestly, we saw it earlier this week, but it does a lot more damage than you tend to expect immediately. We saw Kleena soloing some objectives, Gold Furies, Pyromancers, things like that. So Lasbra might have that in their future. They've managed to push this very silently. We're approaching the 2,000 gold mark. Now they're just slightly over that. So the Bolts are feeling good at this 6 minute. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to get the kills that they want, and I think that's actually a good note for the Valkyries, as they've at least slowed that aspect down of the Bolts. But like you said, they're kind of playing defense. Can we get our red buffs? Can we stay alive? The answer might not be yes here. Zeros forced to leap away. Ice Raffer forced to take some awkward pathing through the jungle. They still get the red buff, and they manage to stay alive.
It makes a lot of sense to me that both these teams can be really scrappy in the mid 3v3 and have no one die at all, and it's because of how efficient these support items are going to be for their teams. Look at how these mid 3v3s are structured. For the Valhalla Valkyries, it's 3 magical damage dealers. So what does Jake buy right away? Heartward Amulet. Get that magical protection aura for your entire team. Makes you incredibly tanky against their roster, and it makes your team pretty tanky as well. On the other side, the Sovereignty is great for Raffer as well.
Well, Jake's going to test some of that tankiness now. Locked up, goes to half health, and doesn't seem to be worried too much. Circle of Protection dropped and popped, but it's not going to be able to get enough healing. He's running away. A couple of veils torn open thanks to Lasbra, who's just sitting in the wall. They finally get the kill onto Jake, and there's no retaliation from the Bolts, so that's going to be a clean kill for the Valks.
Clean kill for the Valks. This double Divine Ruin start between Ice and Zeros looks really good. Made sure that Circle of Protection, instead of healing Jake to full, barely healed him at all between that Divine and the Sickening Strike from Sobek applying some anti-heal. Made it very difficult for Jake to be able to withstand it. And look, I mean, he still lived for a long time. It was all 3 ultimates. It still took them a long time to kill him. And he's going to get even tankier as he gets another magical defense item. Could be any of the Kasaris, basically, because they're all pretty good.
3 breastplates stacked on top of each other right now.
Yep.
There for the Valkyries. And it's only funny to me because I don't think I've gotten to see tier 2 items lined up like that in a long time. At least not across 3 people.
All in a row as well.
Yeah, and off that back, I mean, it's pretty much perfect timing for them. We'll see, I guess, how many of those are breastplates, what they all morph into, things like that. The red buff has been the target for the Bolts in the past. It's respawn. They have Immel, Ice, Raffer, and Zeros all transitioning over to the mid lane. Jake takes a little bit of poke, circle of protection, still not back up. His beads are down as well. Same thing for Finn. As they get aggressive, Lasmer caught out in the walls. It's going to be a good dash forward from Raffer, but he's not going to be able to get the plug thanks to the beads from Lasmer. Raffer takes a lot of damage in return. Barras rotated in, goes for the ult, but it's not going to be enough damage if he can get the acid spray. Not able to connect onto Raffer. The Valkyries walking away alive one more time.
Man, these scraps in mid are just so difficult to win because everyone is so tanky against each other. And there's just so much defense on the board and so little spread in offense. You know, it's all physical damage here for the Olympus Bolts. This tank ESET is not going to be doing enough to threaten you at any point in the game. So you don't have to worry about her damage at all. So it's effectively all physicals. Then on the other side, it's all magical. It's just not enough to actually threaten you in any way. From the physical damage side, at least until Amelito scales up and starts to deal some relevant damage. Ducky as well will get there, but doesn't really do so yet. With it all being so centralized on each side, everyone is going to feel unbelievably tanky until people start getting percent pen online. We might see that be prioritized a little bit more heavily. If I'm Zeros, like, does Soul Reaver really even do me that much good? Third item, I think I'd need Op Shard.
Well, Haddix caught out in the jungle. The heal will proc. He's going to go under the tier 2 tower. Ducky goes up into Bat Out of Hell, chases him down, hits him once, and then falls back. Blue buff is still there, but Lazarus rotated in. So has Jake. There's a silence on the Ice, stun onto Ice. The follow-up with the boulder and the damage follow-through. It's going to be able to connect and almost low enough. But like you said, just too tanky to burn through. And I'll give the benefit over to the Valkyries because it's not just against the Bolts. That's going to help against towers. It's going to help against the Phoenixes. I mean, they're going to be feeling pretty good when they finish their items.
Yeah, it's weird because I think that physical items are typically, you know, much better against the map, as you just said. It's better against minions, it's better against towers, those are dealing physical damage. You know, all of that is really good to be able to stack physical defense. But the magical defense items are really efficient, typically. I mean, you look at an item like Bulwark of Hope that is so cost efficient, gives you so many stats. You know, magical defense items, you normally only build like one dedicated magical defense item and the rest is hybrid or more physical. Because these items are so efficient, it's going to be an interesting thing. You know, who gets more value? You know, the Bolts, and particularly Jake, for spending his gold in a way that upgrades into really easy, cheaper items that give him a ton of stats? Or is it going to be the Valkyries who are building a little bit more against the map?
Contagion ends up being the option there for Raffer. Just picks that one up. And his breastplate for both the mid laner and the jungle on the Valkyrie. So a little bit of cooldown coming through. Beads galore on the side of the Bolts, so they still need something that is going to help isolate and maybe lock those down. Haddix and Ducky once again getting in a little bit of a scuffle, but that's about all it is a little bit of a scuff on the health bar there for Ducky. He walks out just fine. Haddix potentially looking for something that could turn into a rotation. Right now it's just jungle camp steals. And that's what it's been. I mean, it's very quiet, right? There's 3 kills, 12 minutes, very far pace from what we saw in Game 1. Yet at the same time, the Bolts are approaching 4,500 gold in the lead. It's just been a silent farm fest for them where they've been very successful, despite the fact that the last kill actually goes the way of the Valkyries. Now, well, I was going to say they're looking for a little bit more. I don't know how much they're going to be able to lock down anything in mid. They try to lock down Haddix over here, and so far the CC seems to be working on him. He's going to be able to get his push out of there. The heal will proc in time to keep him just tanking up, but there's a good stun. Ice chases him down, and they get the kill under the tower. But that is the sign for the Gold Fury from the Bolt. Circle of Protection drop. They secure that one, despite Raffer and Zeros trying to do their best, and then Raffer falls immediately after. It's a clean kill and a good objective.
Yeah, not the best secure there from Jake. Definitely drops his ultimate too late. It was actually Barracuda that secured it with the acid spray, but hey, at the end of the day, Gold Fury goes the way of the Olympus Bolts. You trade 1 for 1. It is a good play, though, from the Valkyries going to a lane that they can actually be ganking.
Zeros beats popped, stun, caught him out after the dash, but you can see that breastplate doing a little bit of work. He doesn't have a lot of health left, but he's still alive, and that's really where those protections are going to pay off. Ice rotates in. Jake is really low. One good stun Could find a kill onto the east set. Good stun from Jake. Helps find the peel, but it's not enough to save his life. Lazara Berra too late to retaliate. So the Valkyries walk up and get another kill.
I mean, Jake looks so tanky in that mid 3v3, right? That you kind of forget that he's a mage, and then Ducky comes over in one vampiric bats and chunks him for a significant portion of his HP, and all of a sudden it comes rushing back, and then he's playing a mage just with magical defense items against a bunch of Guardians in the mid lane and a Tiamat that is not particularly strong at that point anyways. So good rotation in from Ducky. Ice and Ducky work really well together on that kill on the right-hand side, both coming mid, setting up for another kill there. Some signs of life from the Valkyries. Still down by a lot of gold, but I think this composition from the Bolts is just so easy to tank against that it could be enough for the Valkyries to still climb back into this game. But Ducky certainly needs some more physical defense. I mean, I know that he needs to be dealing damage as he's one of the only 2 physical damage dealers, but Emilito should theoretically be able to do a lot as well. I would have loved to see a more defensive-oriented start because you can just stack that physical defense so easily.
Physical defense doing a lot of work for Rapper, at least in trying to give him some staying power. He's going to make it out alive. Does still use the ult. Lurking in the waters, has been burned. And he did pop the meditation as well, so he's going to be healing up a little bit. That gives him staying power if he so chooses. With the green buff picked up, I imagine that's exactly what he's planning. Rotating back over into mid. 5 members of the Bolts are here. Raffer less than half health. The tier 1 tower goes down. Not a lot to do here if you're the Valkyries with your disengage pretty much being set up. Nobody wants to try and fight. And realistically, you'd have to do it around Ducky right now, as you had highlighted, because he's the only one who seems to be able to eat through. At least Jake. Vin, Lazara, they might be a little bit easier.
Yeah, overall, I think that even though I was just talking about how easy the Bolts composition is to itemize against, they're still going to be very good at doing just that, pushing down these towers, getting objectives quickly. And I really love the way they're building right now. I mean, Ven is nearly done with Titan's Bane already, really prioritizing that percent pen, particularly for his abilities, which is where he's going to be doing a lot of his damage. And then this Executioner for Barracuda in order to strip away some of that physical defense and open up the damage, not just for himself, but for Lazara, Haddix, and Ven as well, because it's armor reduction on the other side, not just outright, strip for yourself like something like percent pen is. So really smart building here from the Bolts to counteract a weakness in their composition.
Tier 1 on right goes down. That's the last Tier 1 the Valkyries had standing. 16 minutes in. If those beads weren't popped just now by Ice, we might be looking at another kill. Only 6 in the game compared to this time last game where it was like 12. Or no, 12 just for the Bolts. Maybe even more because they were pushing a kill a minute for a long time. Maybe it was 18 total throughout the game. Now they're putting some pressure. They actually get good damage on this Tier 2. Now they've got Raffer locked down a little bit. Maybe not looking for the kill, but at least keeping him isolated.
With that lurking in the waters, it'll slow him down, but Haddix still has med. Zeros isn't dealing quite enough damage yet. You feel like Haddix is going to be out, but a blink in from Ducky trying to keep this chase going.
Yeah, Ducky pushed back thanks to Haddix, but that's going to be the re-aggression. There's the Suns getting dropped, and look at the damage being done now that Immel has joined the fray. Haddix gets burned through, and it's a 1 for none, but still a good trade for the Valkyries, putting themselves up by 1 kill, and now have the man advantage around the Pyromancer.
For all the magical defense that Jake has, Haddix has basically none, just that Katakeya shield, which doesn't give you a whole lot of either protections.
Now Pyromancer needs to be the top of the conversation if you are the Valkyries. Berra just now took a Tier 2 over there on left. Lazarus in the wall, takes the Pyromancer away from him as well. They are getting everything they want. Now Vin has to get allowed alive to make sure this stays worth it. He gets a kill in the middle of all of that. Maybe not the most favorable trade just in terms of the fight, but they're still going forward. Jake, as well as Lazarus, 2 different fights. Jake just needs to stay alive. They're so low. Good silence. He gets a good shield as well. Good stun. And he's able to walk away currently.
No
for a
way!
little bit of movement, and he's running away. Lazarus gets a kill onto Ricochet,
Ricochet!
and now you've got the safety. Haddix comes in, gets 1 kill, and Immel has to try and get out of here. That invisibility isn't going to help, and the boulder secures the kill. It is catastrophe for the Valkyries.
Bro, how does Jake live, man? How does he live in that situation? I mean, it's great jukes. It's the double dispel magic, gives himself a bigger shield and the perfect spirit ball accuracy. But still, man, I cannot believe that he survives in that moment. Didn't have really any sort of physical defense, but still able to sneak away through the teeth there. ML didn't exactly miss a ton in that moment. It's really a lot of credit to Jake for putting on the moves, but those are the types of plays that just backbreak you. You feel like it should be going well, all of a sudden we don't get those kills and we chase and die.
You lose the kills, you chase and die, you lose the Pyro, you lose the tier 2 on left, and now you lose the Fire Giant. 5 members strong for the Bolts. Ducky showing face a little bit, but unfortunately for them, what was relatively even, at least in terms of experience and what we were seeing out of the kills and the fight potential, has skyrocketed. It is now 10,000 gold favoring the Bolts, and they're trying to try to push that even further. Maybe even more of a fight. Good knock-up from Haddix. Boulder, who gets thrown out there, only connects onto Raffer. The Bolts try to figure out how to crack open this right-hand tier 2.
Lasmer's just been an absolute menace so far. Now Ducky isolated, has to use that bat out of hell, and now it's Raffer left to the Wolves.
Yeah, he goes into the lurking in the waters, but those waters aren't safe enough. There's something a little bit more than the crocodile in them. They find the kill, and they manage to tear him apart. Now a 4v5, and of course Ducky TKO'd, has to fall back to the base to get healed up. This Phoenix is now open and available. 19 minutes in, right-hand Phoenix and Imolito are looking to go down. Imol dashes out of there, good leap. Keeps him alive, but they lose the bird in the process.
I mean, right side Phoenix without any sort of concern, and the Bolts Relic situation truthfully isn't very good. I mean, they don't have Aegis on both Lasmer and Ven going into that fight. Barra loses his beads to a good pluck from Raffer, but Ice had Blink ult that whole time, just never decided to use it.
Get aggressive, Haddix in. Blink forward, goes for the knockup, beads out instead. Ice tries to get aggressive. Immel pushed into the waiting arms of the rest of the Bolts, but it's Jake who is eating the majority of the damage. Good boulder from Haddix. It's a little bit of damage out there, but it is the Bolts on the back foot. Good defense right now from the Valkyries. Barra half health, but Lasmer gets the first kill in the engagement. They're going to have to back up. Circle of Protection has been used. They don't have a lot of healing on the side of the Bolts. Raffer, Ducky, Ice aren't necessarily looking much better off. And they're going to go ahead and continue to re-aggress. Lasmer jumps in, and it gets a lot of damage down onto Ducky. Now it's just the mid-Phoenix, which is going to fall.
Lasmer has to use the Aegis on the way out, but ends up surviving anyways. Limit testing a little bit there with the Kleedna, but it ends up outworking perfectly. And now the Bolts can just go back towards this Oni Fury, pick this up, and put themselves in a really dominant position, because the Valkyries are going to have to deal with 2 different Oni Fire waves while simultaneously defending the left side Phoenix, because there's still 1.5 minutes plus on this Fire Giant for the Bolts. So this is not going to get easier for the Valkyries. Yeah, Haddix just picked up a 3k pot, an elixir of defense, instead of going to finish off his last item, because that's just going to give him a ton of damage mitigation, and he feels like this game's likely to end before that elixir wears off. And I find myself agreeing with him. Not just the way the Bolts are playing, but their composition and how it's structured. This is where it can be very strong, is on these objective fights. And Kleedna, overall, I think is at her best in the 2 most important parts of the game, and that's Fire Giant dances and Phoenix sieges. She is so hard to deal with on both of those scenarios, because normally you don't have as many options on where to go, but Kleedna does, and that can be very difficult.
It is wild to watch, Lasmer just jumping in and out of these walls really well on top of that, and opening up a lot of engagement, specifically around these Phoenixes. I mean, you normally you view this wall as a safety net. Lasmer's just going to be able to walk on in there and waltz to the back line if he so chooses, as opposed to the standard blink initiation that we have. Hey, there's case in point example. Has a rift ready in case it is necessary. And the damage is going to be able to ring through. Haddix goes forward. Circle Protection gets dropped. It's this left side Phoenix, but they've got Oni minion waves coming in on mid and right. The Fire minions are on the Titan even, and now the damage is going to be dealt. This is going to be what makes or breaks the Valkyries. Ice low and push back. Immel can't continue the fight, has to stay under it, and Ducky is dead. Raffer, the rest of the team stay alive, but they've got too much to worry about in the Titan room to be able to defend this Phoenix. The Bolts are going to be able to clean that one up, no problem. The rest of the team isolated, locked down, Titan half health. They get the kill onto Ice. The Bolts walk forward. Takes them a couple minutes longer. They're going to go ahead and take game number 2 and put themselves on set match.
And that's just as easy as game 1. Even though it took them a couple extra minutes, you never really felt like they were going to lose control. It wasn't as dominant in the kill department, but when it came down to the gold lead, I mean, I feel like we were sitting in mid watching them 3v3 absolutely brawl with no deaths for like 6 straight minutes, and during those 6 minutes, the Bolts like gained 2,500 gold, and it felt difficult.
It's not like they did any objectives either. Like they just got it. I still don't know where they got it, honestly.
Yeah, I was so focused on how everyone was so tanky in that mid 3v3 that I couldn't find where the gold was coming from. And I don't think the Bolts really minded just having those scraps because they got to have a little bit of fun and they got to grow that lead.
Well, they line their pockets with gold. They end both the game 1 and game 2 around that 21 to now 23-minute mark. We'll see if they can close it out in 3 or if the Valks have some sort of answer back here right after this.
make sure to head on over to shop.smiteproleague.com if you want to pick up any of the cool apparel that is for your favorite team out here, whether you got the Bolts, the Valkyries, Dragons, Leviathans, whatever team out there is your favorite, you can get some of their merchandise. Specifically, you can pick up some of the cool joggers that we have for those teams out there that have the team-branded logo on them. We also have the mouse pads for each of the individual teams available to you over at shop.smiteproleague.com. So make sure to pick one of yours up. It is starting to cool down here, at least in the south. It's starting to finally cool down after we've had long and warm or hot summers all the way through. So make sure to pick one up and maybe even a complimentary mouse pad. One of them for each of the teams here in the Smite Pro League. Thanks to our friends over at Insight Apparel for providing all of this to you, the fans at home. One more time, shop.smiteproleague.com to pick up your favorite team's merchandise or anything else. If you don't want mouse pad or jogger, there's plenty of other options out there available to you. Game number 2, a little bit longer than game number 1, a little bit more contested, a lower kill count. We saw some signs of hopes around that kind of Pyromancer Fire Giant scuffle there, but it finally kind of looked like the final straw that broke the camel's back was Jake escaping on that E set against 2.
Yeah, man, I heard aggro freaking out about it. But even when the Valhalla Valkyries are able to establish kills throughout the early game or even the mid game, they find a couple of picks. They were never really able to transition it into much of a lead. Even at one point, I believe they were up 2 kills on the Olympus Bolts, and they were still down about 6,000 gold. The macro play from the Olympus Bolts is what nets them this victory. Sure, the team fights look good, but it really is which teams just got more resources than the other. And this time around, it was the Olympus Bolts, just mid-camps, Greater Scorpions, Gold Furies, Pyromancers, Fire Giants, everything to the Chaos team's name.
And that little first blood that we got to see out of Barracuda on that Medusa gives you a nice little showing as just to how much damage a Medusa can do. It's not like she hasn't been able to do all that kinds of damage. It's just nobody's really been able to showcase it up until now, even with those changes that come up through. Just some solid damage across the board. Haddock's on this Hercules just being a massive bully and honestly saving Jake's life right at the very end there with that double push, making sure that the Bolts support, I should say, gets to live on towards the next fight and just continue to run out. I mean, at the end of the game, it was highlighted. He didn't even buy another item. He just bought a 3K defense pot, and then they just went for the Phoenix.
Yeah, man. Haddox was having just a great time this game. I mean, there's no other way to word it. He was having fun, as were the rest of the Olympus Bolts. Yeah, it was about 17 minutes in. I saw 5-4 was the slash line favoring the Valkyries, but it was a 7,000 gold lead for the Olympus Bolts. This time around, I think that the Valkyries have kind of rectified some of the issues that we saw in game 1. They were finding a couple of kills, a couple of engagements that looks good for them. So they've cleaned up the actual fighting itself. Now you got to start to look towards the macro game. You got to start transitioning these kills into objectives, be it tier 1 towers, gold furies, and net yourself some actual leads, because 5-4 down 7K just does not look great.
Yeah, it wasn't a fun game in game number 1. It wasn't so much of a fun game here in game number 2. Game number 3 is the final chance for the Valks to get a win here over the Olympus Bolts. Otherwise, they're going to be meeting Sleekness down on the lower half of the bracket in that 3rd place match to see who gets to move on for one final opportunity to the SWC. The Bolts win here. They punch their ticket to the finals, and then they just got to beat the Dragons, and they go to the SWC.
They just got to beat
the Dragons. I mean, you only got to beat another top team in the SPL to make it there. But, you know, kind of joking aside here, I mean, you come out, you play 2 big sets, and you get to move on to the SWC, and if the Bolts can get a nice and quick first one here, then they get to get a lot of prep work going up towards the Dragons.
For the first time this set, it's the Olympus Bolts in the first pick position. We'll see whether or not that affects their picks and bans, but considering we got a completely different look at the Olympus Bolts, prioritizing ESET and Hercules in the last game, I don't think this is going to adjust their pick order too much, whereas the Valkyries now can get something pretty nice for themselves. They don't have to worry so much about this Sun Wukong ban on the other side, because in second pick, you can still get whatever you want.
It is going to be pretty much the same bans across the board that were in game number 2. The only thing that's left would be the Odin ban out of the Valkyries if they decide to go that path. That would make it the same 6. And then it just comes down to a question of what do the Bolts want to first pick. And I'm going to be honest, Mifflin, after the kind of fun that they got to have in game number 2, I'm not sure where the Bolts go for a first pick.
Well, if Goremiser's going to have his way, and as I was walking into the studio here to get onto the desk, I saw Goremiser speaking with a couple of the Bolts players, and there's only one god we haven't seen in the SPL just yet, and that is Nox. Ooh. So if he has his way, if the Bolts were going to be receptive to his begging, maybe it would have been a Nox, but instead ESET locked in. Got to talk about that flex potential. Can go into the jungle. Hope it doesn't go into the jungle. Can go into mid. kind of hope it doesn't go into mid either. Support, though, looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild twist of events that he said has had over her course of a lifetime. She was one of the staple mid laners for such a while. Years back, of course. Not any time as of recent has she ever been super strong in mid. And then Sino busts this guy out in the SCC and says, all right, cool. Jungle ESET. Ban it away if you ever see me in a game. And now we're at the point where ESET support is kind of becoming the staple amongst not just the SCC, but here now, even in the Pro League. Now twice picked up by the Bolt. The Valkyries respond by grabbing Soul and Kleena, taking Lasbra off of that assassin.
Soul, one of Zero's best picks and very survivable, which should help out a lot up against picks like ESET that have to telegraph their damage. You use the sap rate to avoid the Spirit Ball. If you're able to get into that immunity stance, all of a sudden there's really nothing ESET or anybody else for that matter can do up against you. But the mid 3v3, assuming that this is going to be the mid laner for the Valkyries and the jungler, Kleena, has no CC as of right now. Literally 0. I mean, like a knock-up from Soul's ultimate, if you even want to call it that, as well as a slow. But outside of that, the silence from Kleena, not too consistent. The ultimate from Kleena is a slow as well. No hard CC for the Valhalla Valkyries, whereas the Olympus Bolts, they've got a lot of hard CC. Some global, some single target, some multi-target, silences as well. As far as I'm concerned, the Bolts have got themselves a very strong top 3.
A ton of lockdown on the Bolts where the Valkyries are going to need a little bit of extra help here. One more pick to go for the Valks before they jump into their second wave of bans. With ESET, Gilgamesh, and Neath, you can, I guess at this point, kind of safely assume you have your support, your jungle, and kind of your mid laner. We haven't really seen Neath go over into that dual lane in quite a long time.
No, we have not. That global ultimate so much more valuable through mid, I think, as well as some recent buffs helping her out a lot in the clear department. She's got great boxing potential now that Unravel has attack speed steal as well. So matching up against the Soul, you might favor the Neath. Sustain, another huge asset for Neath going forward. I think you're right in saying that it is likely headed towards the mid lane. ESET still looking like a support as of right now. Gilgamesh likely the jungler. And then on the other side, the Valkyries decide to finish up their top 3 with a little bit of that CC we were concerned about. Abduct, going to be a great tool, ranged root, as well as another added layer of safety for the entirety of the team with Scarab's Blessing.
And it's kind of one of Raffer's go-to picks when their backs are against the wall. He's gone towards this Khepri so many times in the past, and hopefully will not do any sins towards him today. The second round of bans start up. It's a Nike out of the Valhalla Valkyries, so banning away some of that solo lane presence. They do have first pick coming out of this next wave of bans, so they got to imagine they got a lot of things to keep in mind. That's what they want to go with Ducky and Ice Ice, Ice Ice already has that clean, what they need with Ducky and either mid laner Zeros or Emil, depending on where this soul goes. The Bolts, they're going to go ahead and take some hunters out here, at least the first one being Izanami.
Yeah, it seems like the Bolts tend to agree with us on the desk that this soul is largely going to head towards the mid lane. We'll see if they decide to kind of play a fence-sitting role and ban out a mid laner on the other end. Instead, it is going to be the Achilles to round out the bans for the Olympus Bolts. Both of these teams have got pretty strong drafts. I think that the Valkyries have got themselves a much better look at the early game. Soul's got great boxing potential. We've seen a lot of Mannequin Soul in mid. Kleena's early game incredibly strong as well. Has one of the hardest hitting auto attack chains at levels 1 through 3. And now with Camazotz likely headed for the Soul lane, you've got great dive potential as a team. You can send Camazotz in on his own and just have Khepri hovering in the wings, just waiting for him to land out of that bat out of hell, drop that Scarab's Blessing, and allow that Camazotz facilitate him to continue diving.
You are still fairly light on CC, though. Same kind of tune as Kleena here, just a lot of damage and minimal CC. Only a slow out of Camazotz here on this side for the Valkyrie. So they got this double assassin kind of as your front line to throw a Khepri in the midst there. And now the Olympus Bolts. They went back and forth multiple times on picks, so I'm not going to hold my breath that a Vulcan is going to be the selection here for the Bolts. Instead, maybe try and kind of dial in and focus onto where the Valkyries kind of take their final pick. I mean, if we're thinking that the Soul is going to go mid 100, do you want to see Emil come out with?
Well, knowing Emil, he really likes Ho Yi. He's got phenomenal bounces. I think it's something that could fit in here. It's going to help out a lot with your space control. You don't really have a lot of space control already on the side of the Valks. You get another additional stun as well. So that comes to mind as a potential pick. You've also got the, if that's a Freya lock-in on her, all of a sudden starts to look a lot better as well. So I think that the Valks are going to likely reactively play around these next two selections from the Olympus Bolts. Then you can kind of figure out more so which way they're going to go.
So Freya being hovered, we had Vulcan, Kukulkan, who knows what else the Olympus Bolts we'll throw as a hover here. Did mention earlier that the only god who has not been played in a competitive setting, or at least in a competitive SPL match this season, has been Nox. And at this point, it does not seem like we will be seeing that god locked in here. It'll be a Muzen Cobb and Loki for the final 2 picks out of the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah, I just heard Goremizer mumble from across the room that he is indeed sad that there is no Nox here. Just thought I'd report in on that one. Not a whole lot of magical damage for the Olympus Bolts going forward. This E-set in support, likely. Yeah, nothing else really screams support at me. You don't really want a double Hunter lane. Means that you're really not going to have a whole lot of damage or magical damage full stop. Luckily, though, with some recent changes to AMC, Stinger now applying a 30% defense shred is going to help out a lot with this double Hunter composition. So I think the Olympus Bolts have got themselves something that is going to scale very well into the late game. They've also got a lot of incredibly strong early game pieces. Gilgamesh, levels 1 through 3, and an amazing bully. Loki's early game scaling is actually very strong as well. And then the late game, you've got double Hunter, so objectives are going to fall down very, very fast. Whereas the Valks on the other end, I think they've got a draft that is slightly better. I would say that this is the first time in P's and P's where I think the Valks have come out with a superior composition. They've got great scaling. They've diversified their damage. Soul and Chiron are going to operate similarly to Neath and AMC around these neutral objectives. You've got Khepri to kind of deal with this dive mentality of the Olympus Bolts. Gilgamesh, E-set, Loki, all going to be W-keying you the entirety of the game. Khepri can stop the channeled abilities from E-set. He can immune a death for at least one ally. So I really do like how the Valks line up against the Olympus Bolts. It's just whether or not they can get to a point where it's actually a 5-on-5 engagement.
Chiron has that final pickup here between the Soul. And we did see the Chiron go mid, I should say, with the Bolts last time around. But the Soul is one of those gods that the Valkyries have seen success on in the past. It's a pick that Zeros has been thriving with before, been able to get at least some big kills and get things going in one of those lanes. If you're the Valkyries, which lane are you looking to really establish that presence and try and get that early game going?
You're really hoping that your Camazotz solo does well, because a Camazotz that is feasting is able to kind of put his pressure elsewhere on the map. You're keeping your eye on Kleena out of the jungle, hoping that he's able to hit the ground running. You can generally expect that the mid laner should be able to hold their own, assuming that it is going to be that Soul. Again, the flex potential between Soul and Chiron is there. I don't think that there's one particular lane that the Valkyries have to overly focus. I think they've got essentially the field ahead of them.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough match here for the Valkyries. They're down 2-0 in the set in this best of 5. Again, if the Valkyries lose here, it's not the end of the road for them. They still do have one more chance to make it through. They'll have to play up against Sleekness if they lose this game here and drop to the Bolts. The Bolts, if they win this one, they move on and they play the Jade Dragons in the finals.
And they just got to beat the Jade Dragons.
They just got to beat the Jade Dragons if they want to go to Worlds, man. That's,
easy pathing.
That's all that you got to do, man.
Diff.
Just beat the Dragons. And just kind of like the Scarabs tomorrow, they just got to beat the Leviathans if they want to go. But here it's the Bolts and the Valkyries. Game number 3, one final chance. Can the Valkyries do it? Let's find out.
Let's see what they have to hold on to here. It's Gornagra one more time, at least one more time, depending on what the Valkyries decide to do here. And we'll see what they have to offer us. We go back to the E-set support. Bear's playing Neath, which is something I don't think we get to see too often. Vin back on the AMC. And Lasbra on Loki. I mean, Mifflin had mentioned it. You had talked about it last time, but there's not a lot of magical damage, once again, for the Bolts. And that only slowed them down by 2 minutes last time.
No, not a lot of mages in general this week, huh, Gore? I mean, it's been a lot of Hunters mid. The mages we have seen are like Soul, basically. I mean, Hurry was playing Zeus and Zhang Kui, but you know, you don't see many traditional mages these days. I wonder if that trend is going to continue as we get deeper into placements.
And I even asked Vin about mages for the pregame interview, and then he goes and doesn't play any of them for me.
No, he's played Chiron and 2 AMC games, but remember way back in the day, Ven used to be a Hunter main. That was his first role before mid in a competitive setting, and was good there, and has obviously been great in mid as well, but going back to his roots.
Well, Neath getting a lot of damage done. Someone that you can talk about early game. There's a good stun as well. Spirit Arrow just off the mark there. So Barracuda not going to be able to find what could have been a first blood against Raffer. They found a lot of pressure last time, and they're going to continue that amount of pressure now. Emilito is the one who has to run away. He's going to be able to stay alive, but you know, living with meditation just barely keeping him going. It definitely feels like you can already see the Bolt's aggression paying off, and they're sitting on that tower line.
Everywhere they are. I mean, Lasbra steps up in mid, Ducky getting jumped on at his tower line by Haddix, Emil and Raffer getting gunned down. We didn't get a chance to talk about it too much, I'd say, last game, but this E-set support for Jake looked really good, didn't it? I mean, sure, he got picked a little bit, but he was awfully accurate with that Spirit Ball. And if you can be accurate with Spirit Ball, you're going to be feeling pretty good on E-set.
It's one of my favorite abilities, I think, in Smite, just because of how satisfying it feels to be able to hit, especially a long-range one. Right now, a little bit of pressure from Ice onto Jake. Puts him in a little bit of trouble. Mana's half there for Jake. His health even lower. Ice comes in. First blood goes to Zeros. And now they're collapsing in onto Barracuda and Venenu. Vin has no mana to work with. Barra has no health. That's 2 kills. Clean for the Valkyries to start things off.
That's the type of start the Valkyries needed right there. No beads in the duo lane for the Olympus Bolts. It is a double meditation lane from Jake and Barracuda. And Jake doesn't get a chance to get his off until he's far too low. Barras doesn't end up doing enough for him either. And they end up both falling, and that's a great start there for the Valkyries. Good rotation from Ice, puts pressure on the E-set. Want to take the fight to her a little bit and try and back her off of your tower line. And that no beads for him ends up making a big difference there.
Just after we were complimenting Jake, of course, that immediately means the Valkyries get off to not only a great start, but also the best start they've had so far. I mean, this is the first time I've been able to look up even 3 minutes in, and they've had a gold lead. In fact, it might be the first gold lead they've had this set. So already, things are ready for the Valkyries to continue this amount of pressure. And you get the kills on, I would argue, 2 important players. You get Ice and Zeros, who have kind of needed that help in mid, and that's going to help isolate them, although Emilito might be the one in need of help right now. Barra, once again, misses that Spirit Arrow. It's going to be just off the mark of being able to find any potential kill. It's not going to stop Jake from still dishing out damage, but it is going to stop the kill potential in the duo lane.
Hey, still bringing that dominance and poking Emilito out, taking away his lane scorp. I mean, getting a little bit of extra pressure in getting Barra that XP to try and get him closer to 5. But Ice on the way, trying to re-gank over here.
Yeah, good pathing as well. Make sure to cut him off. Isn't going to get the backflip immediately. So now Barra's going to get a good disengage. Ice gets some good healing. But they don't get the kills that you would have wanted from your jungler showing up over here. Vin kind of stepped into the jungle. I wondered if there was going to be a like slow rotation coming out from the Bolts to match. But no, it's just going to be Ice backing off. And the rest of the Valkyries going back to their tower.
Yeah, not a bad idea to come over and re-gank, knowing that both meditations are still on cooldown, but more important that no one was level 5 in that fight. And if they're not level 5, can't get you.
There's a level 5 now. Lasbra comes in, gets the stun, locks down Raffer. Barra gets credit for that kill. Himmel doesn't have a lot of mana, but he's not going to leave the tower range. Now those meditations are going to be coming back up. Give it about 5 more seconds. So survivability and apparently kill capabilities for the Bolts are on the rise.
Definitely, especially with these level 5s now in the duo lane. But good timing on that gank from Lasbra. Still level 4 from Raffer. Knows that he has the opportunity to just CC chain him and got the E-set there alongside.
Yeah, the classic Neath. I'm just going to sit here in my ult. Like, worst case scenario, you walk towards me and I ult you. Best case scenario, everybody on your team now is a little wary of where they're standing because a stun can come out of nowhere across the map. Global presence for Barra is going to be important. Jake trying to steal away a purple buff. Missed pull by Raffer, but Ice is in the neighborhood. And he's going to be coming around. Jake doesn't have a lot of mana to work with. Root not going to be able to connect, but Ice is still here, and he's going in. Backflip forced, and there's a circle of protection as well. Ice closing the gap. Jake uses the last stun, and there's going to be a Root in retaliation. Jake's getting low, and there's that double med. It's healing him up, and it's going to be just enough. They're diving the tower. They're trying to find the kill. Ice is going to be able to do so, and the hi-rez keeps him alive and pulls him back to safety.
Really well played there from the Valkyries. Just using all the tools, making sure we use our ultimates at the right time. Ice not chickening out and making sure that he's got that Scarab's Blessing, and Raffer's right there with it the entire time. Well played dive from the Valhalla Valkyries, and the Olympus Bolts just don't have an answer to that. I mean, if you're going to get triple ulted and chased all the way underneath your tier 1, you're not going to be able to survive on E-set, even in support. So good dive there from the Valkyries, and keeps the aggression up. You know, I don't want to see them start to lose that forward thinking, you know, that initiation that they could potentially have. Keep the tempo of this game high and I think they've got a better chance.
When you had mentioned it last game, it was very easy for Jake to go into a Heartward Amulet because he didn't have as much any physical damage to worry about in the mid 3v3. That Camazot's getting shifted into the jungle has opened it up. He's gone for the Thieves. It feels just so much easier to take care of him.
Right, it's so much easier. He doesn't have that instant defense against you and everyone else who's hitting him at the exact same time, and his carries don't have a little bit of extra protection for it either, so that feels really good. Speaking of this Camazot in the jungle, I am a little surprised that it ended up being Kama jungle because obviously we've seen so much Kama solo. And with the Kleedna, I thought that would be going to Ice, but Ducky taking it and seems to be doing pretty well for himself over there in that solo lane. But Kleedna she doesn't, a lot like Camazot's to be fair, they don't bring a lot of CC to your team composition. It is basically just damage. But the thing that Kama has is sustain. You know, he can stay in the fights really long, even though he's not really doing any sort of utility. But because he can just eat so much damage and live through it anyways, that's what makes him a viable solo laner. Kleedna might just be damage in that moment, so you might have some more trouble.
I'll have to keep my eyes. Ducky forced to fall back there. Some aggression from the bolts, at least from Lasber and Haddix. Jake is on the back foot, trying to stay alive, get under the tier 1 tower, or at least into safety, which the safety net provided by his team is going to make sure he can get out alive. This has been great from the Valkyries so far. But like you said, I think it should have clicked a lot sooner that there was a Kleedna in the game and that it wasn't anywhere that I had seen so far. Ducky is going to have an interesting time up against the Gilgamesh, someone we also don't typically get to see over in the solo lane. In fact, I think Ducky is one of the only, if not one of the few, who have played it in the solo lane this year.
And I think it can work. I mean, I agree that with Niflin that it's better in the jungle than in solo, but I'm down to have a Gilgamesh on my team no matter where he is.
Once the Shamash dropped, the meditation has been used by Haddix to try and stay alive. Ice is in the lane. The Lasbra's taking a gank over. Bera's in trouble in the duo lane, but he's going to be able to get out safely. Lasbra comes on in, gets at least one Veil ripped away from Ducky. And that is going to be enough as he backs away. And they're just trying to make sure that there's no pressure on this tower, on that buff when it respawns. That's not going to slow down Ice, though. He's still peeking around in the jungle this side of the map. How's the 1v1 between Kama and Loki?
Well, one of Kama's strengths is that he just can't lose Assassin 1v1s because
he can just get out.
So he just leaves.
Yeah.
Loki is nearly unbeatable in the Assassin 1v1, especially late game. Just the ability to dictate how the engagement starts every single time is super strong. His 2 gives him damage, gives you damage reduction on the other side, and his burst damage is just absolutely crazy. So I think that is potentially a reason why we see the Kama in the jungle, is that Loki normally is so dominant, and those Assassin 1v1s can't really abuse that as well up against Camazots, but Lasber gets the jump on him, and, just button checks Ice. Reaction time checks him on Assassinate, forces him to ultimate before that stun comes out. Maybe he could have enough in order to do it and just one-shot him through the stun in the late game, but it would require Ice to not have beads and not press 4.
Well, at least one of those is check-marked, which is not have beads. Not press 4, that's up to Ice in those engagements. He's showing up over here on this left-hand side of the map. It's just Bera all alone. And Neath backflip, very telegraphed, usually very easy to follow. So Bera might be a little more susceptible to these ganks. A couple of pings that are coming out, just showcasing where he is. And look at Raffer's pathing as well. Feels like it was going to be a long loop around to the duo lane. He's now transitioned over towards mid. Doesn't have anywhere near the same level of help from his team over there. So a little bit of a slow pace. And despite all of what felt like huge gank potential from the Valkyries, kind of just fizzles out.
Fizzles out a little bit. And, if I'm the Valkyries and I'm looking at how this, how the bolts are itemizing, 3 meditations, I'd certainly prioritize getting some anti-heal. Does not seem like they have so far, but Ice looks pretty likely to in that second slot, so I like that quite a bit. But I think that Raffer in particular, seeing no beads for this AMC, I think you've got to try and punish him. Just a ranged root is so difficult for him to handle. You could easily force Stinger just by posturing aggressively and then rooting it, because he can't afford to get abducted. He'll die in that channel unless he Aegis's preemptively, and even then he's going to take a lot of damage. So would like to see Raffer continue to play aggressive.
Well, they're getting aggressive, just onto Jake, not necessarily Vin. Either way, still happy. They force him to fall back. They're not able to get the kill that they would have wanted. A map check as of right now. No towers have fallen just yet. And the gold lead is just about 300 in favor of the Valkyries, not necessarily a gargantuan amount. And it might change in just a second. Good stun, good engage from the Bolts. It's a 4v2 in mid, and Raffer is just gone. A delete button slapped down by the Bolts to give themselves another kill.
Raffer had the ultimate, but don't think it would have mattered. He would have gotten gobbled up right away anyway, so better to hold it in that situation. Holds the med as well, which I think is a good decision. But how about this early rotation from Haddix? I mean, 11 minutes in, helps on that kill in mid, keeps the CC chain going, and now is going to be able to secure this Gold Fury for the squad.
And honestly, providing something that the Bolts are kind of lacking from Jake, which is a body that can actually withstand the damage right now. Jake still trying to work up those items, and Lasber, you can see, has a decent amount of health as of right now, but not necessarily a tanky build. It's a Sovereignty plus more, but now it's Ice. Yeah, you didn't even need the World Weaver, but it was there just to make sure. Now you're getting aggressive on all fronts if you're the Bolts. You get the Gold Fury, you get a kill in right, you even start to get aggressive on the Zeros in mid. And they're just putting a little bit of pressure on. First tower of the game, though, goes to the Valkyries and helps alleviate some of that. In fact, brings us to pretty much a virtually even game, just swinging slightly in favor of the Bolts.
Still pretty good in comparison to the last two early games for the Valkyries.
Yeah, this was like a 5K lead for game 1 and 2.
Yeah, exactly. So they take those in situations like that. But you see the CC chain potential already. Lasbro, you know, Assassinate is a cripple into a stun. Then Jake has a silence. Jake has a stun. Ice had ultimate, but never got a chance to use it. And like you said, there was a World Weaver on the way as well that wasn't even necessary. So definitely have to respect that CC chain if you're a member of the Valkyries.
You have to be worried about it. Bera doesn't have necessarily any cooldown immediately, but anytime that World Weaver is up, that's typically where we see it. The good news is that a World Weaver from duo lane has a lot longer of a reaction time than a World Weaver from mid, where we've actually seen it a lot more, specifically from Zeros throughout this year. Also good news is that Ice is chasing down Bera. If you love the Valkyries, you want this to go on a little bit longer, that's the kind of kill you need. It's now 3-1-1 for Ice out of the jungle.
Now he's got that Brawlers as well, so those meditations aren't going to be quite as impactful on the other side, so definitely a good time to gank. Bear doesn't even use the meditation because he knows he's pretty toast as soon as he shows up. Nice body block.
Yeah, that's
there
a great decoy to make sure that Raffer can't get away. The ult, though, movement speed specifically, helps Raffer go ahead and squeak out of there with his life. Barely any health to his name, but alive nonetheless. He's going to be able to get that back off. Now you can see aggression in the jungle. Jake Lasber running around on the left-hand side. No buffs to steal away, and the minion wave isn't really with him. So ultimately, there's a Scorpion right there that they could go for, but otherwise they're just kind of coasting around.
Yeah, I mean, this comp for the Bolts, very similar to how it has been. Those Zeros in some trouble. World Weaver right there. Disapparate going to get him underneath his tower, and maybe he'll save his life.
There's a good Spirit Ball, but again, not a lot of damage coming down from Jake. So it's not going to find the kill. Keeps Zeros alive. Jake now is in an awkward spot. Circle of Protection dropped down. He's going to be able to get a good heal out of that one. There's the leap in from Haddix as they get aggressive. Ice trying to isolate and find the carries. Lasbro forced away from the fight, and Ducky has finally made a rotation. There's that damage. Jake gets burned down with the help of all 5 members of Valkyrie's. Credit goes over to Zeros, though, and now there's ringing shots from Inolito trying to find Haddix in the back line. Barracuda just has to backflip and walk away because they're going to have to leave this one open. That's going to be aggression, though. 4 members versus right now 1 of the Bolts. Yeah, Barra has to run away. No backflip to his name. Gets under the Phoenix, but it's not enough. Inolito gets the kill, and now they're looking to pressure out this tier 2 as well.
Yeah, that got him in the animation of the 2. Couldn't use the Aegis or the meditation because he's trying to unravel and get that heal. A little too greedy from Barracuda, trying to hold on to the relics, and really gets punished for it easily by the Valkyries, who now have a fairly noticeable lead at this point in the game. You know, 3,000 is nothing to shake a stick at, and they've got this composition that's so good on these objectives, at least in burning them down between the Soul and the Chiron. You've got Kleedna, who, as I said earlier, I think is absolutely unreal around objectives. Valkyrie's in a very good spot right now, and the Olympus Bolts maybe wishing that they had itemized a little bit differently or picked up some different relics, because these meditations not doing quite enough.
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, I'm hearing relics and I'm looking at it. It's just relic for me. It's Barra's meditation that stands out the most. We'll see whether or not that comes back to bite him as it has so far this game. Pyromancer picked up. There is a World Weaver flying through but it's going to get immuned out by zeros there, so no worry, no relics, no anything chased down from the bolts. As Vera continues pushing the left-hand side, Greater Scorpion on the side of the bolts gets taken down. They got the Pyromancer as well. And so that Primal Fury coming up is maybe going to be the next big objective to fight over.
The Valkyries should be there on time. Now, no Frenzy or anything like that. It's actually an Ankh for Raffer, which I really like up against what the Bolts have, which is, again, triple med. They're going to use that in the middle of the team fight, and if you can upgraded Cursed Ankh them, then they're going to be taking more damage for not a ton of sustain at this point in the game. I mean, look, Meditation is really good. I do think it's a good relic, and it's particularly good in lane. In that 2v2 in the duo lane, it is the best relic you can have pre-5. But after that, I do think it falls off pretty hard. And then to have 3 on your team, all of which aren't going to be great come the later stages, now that they have anti-heal, now that they've got Cursed Ankh, the Bolts are really down. You know, I would count 2 meds as the equivalent of 1 relic come late game and competitive. You just don't get nearly as much value out of it.
Yeah.
You're down a lot. You're down a lot of relics basically if you're doing that math.
So, and that's just in general, right?
Right.
But 2 meds with 2 Brawlers, Beat Sticks, 1 Contagion, and a Cursed Ankh on the other side. It might just be half a relic in reality. I don't know if that math completely checks out. Either way, we'll see how the Bolts, because a lot of what we saw, at least from Jake and Barra early on, was popping them at the same time to kind of get a bigger burst of healing. That's not going to work, the amount of anti-heal the Valkyries have, and now they're starting to surround the Bolts, chase them down in the jungle. They don't have a tier 1 or a tier 2 in mid for the Bolts to fall back on. And that is a big deal with the amount of control that you can now exert. Ducky's just hanging out over here in mid lane. I mean, they're putting themselves in a position where one good pick does translate immediately into that Primal Fear.
And both teams have that burn capability, but the Valkyries not showing up and just instantly putting that pressure on, not exactly my favorite. I mean, I understand maybe Raffer wanting to upgrade that Ankh before they take a fight, but other than that, I think that they've got the objective control that I'd want to see them at least try it.
Well, Primal Fury started up. Ducky poked out. That's going to be a blink forward there from Haddix, but it's the objective right now. Barra trying to be in position to steal it away. Not going to be able to get this one. So that is a good win for the Valkyries. They scoop that up, and nobody dies in mid. So the Bolts not able to find anything that they were looking for. They're still showing some aggression, actually feinting their way over to the right-hand side of the map.
Yeah, maybe trying to get a little extra, but no Pyromancer available for them to take right now, so they've just got to hold that L. The Valkyries just group and use their composition strength. Double Hunter, knock down these objectives nice and easily, and they do just that. Well done there by the Valks.
You know, all those smiles from Game 2 have suspiciously disappeared here from the Bolts.
Yeah.
It's still only, well, 1,700 gold, which is a nice, comfortable lead for the Valkyries. But you can definitely see, yeah, the little bit of a dip starting to go back in favor of the Bolts. They need to be careful. We translate into the late game. It's actually a really interesting conversation to be had. Jake has gone Chronos Pendant. That is just now registering into my mind. So we were talking about how not tanky he was. That's going to continue. And that's going to be an interesting aspect. Because if I'm looking to pick anybody in the late game, your front line is absolutely one of the best options to slow down and stop the other team. The Valkyries might have been gifted kills on a silver platter here onto Jake.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you wonder if he could go something like Pridwin in that slot instead, if it's the cooldown that he's really valuing, but getting a little power doesn't feel bad in this situation for Jake. You know, his character is going to leverage that scaling better than, say, Raffer's would on the Khepri, so, you know, there is some benefit to going Chronos over Pridwin in that spot for sure, but as you said, definitely makes him a lot squishier. But he then did back and buy an entire sovereignty in one back, which will alleviate some of those concerns. But Zero's getting to the point now where you feel like he might just be able to dump the whole kid onto the E set and put him down to kill range for someone else.
And be pretty happy with where that ends up. Pyromancer's about to respawn. Fire Giant was started slightly by the Valkyries, but it's going to get left onto the wayside. Speaking of left on the wayside, Eyesight is forced to have the ult from Raffer to keep him alive. Ducky goes a little aggressive, but it's a separated fight right now from both the Bolts and the Valkyries. Haddix barely gets out alive, forced to use the dropkick, but the shots from Amelito are able to find him through the wall. Ducky aggressive one more time, not able to get rooted out by Barra. And so he stays alive, stays fine, and it is a 4v5 in favor of the Valkyries.
And Ice has just gone back to heal up off the camps, never even had to return to base, despite how low he was, so he's just going to come on back and help the Valkyries secure another objective. Pyromancer goes down. Bit of hesitation, but the Valks are on FG.
Yeah, and they're starting it up 3/4 HP remaining on that health bar. Stinger dropped into Ducky. There's going to be a little bit of damage, and Vin gets that back, so he has the cooldown as well. Ice gets aggressive.
Nice.
Good Spirit Arrow gets some damage, but a great Bat Out of Hell gets Ice out again. You pair that with the Khepri, he's just got 3 lives, it feels like, to work with here. And there's a good Spirit Ball, finds his way onto Raffer. Raffer takes some damage. Most of the Valkyries are low, and Raffer goes down. Bera moving forward. Lasbra able to escape with his life. So that Fire Giant feint ends up working against the Valkyries. But ultimately, it's still a 1-for-1 trade, which means that Pyromancer boosts the Valkyries up to the top.
If you're going to go on FG, you have to go. You have to really commit, and it felt like the Valkyries just weren't all on the same page on what they wanted to be doing in that moment. Do we want to fight? Who are our primary targets? How low are we getting FG? Who's tanking? You know, all those sorts of things just felt a little bit out of whack there for the Valkyries, and the Bolts are able to make some poetry in the midst of that chaos, able to sneak through some kills and escape with some low HP bars. Haddix ended up falling, but everyone else able to survive. And Venenu's just starting to deal a ton of damage, man. I mean, his damage is starting to become very, very noticeable on this AMC. Nearly done with what I'm assuming is going to be a Heartseeker, as is Lasbra. So when those two get those items, man, this Valkyries team isn't going to be able to just walk right at this AMC much longer.
And this is an interesting position to be in. If you're the Valkyries, that was a lot of relics that just got used in that last engagement. Pretty much everybody has one down, save for Emilito. The other side, you're missing a couple of meds. You're really not that upset if you're the Bolts and your potential to engage. That being said, the Bolts, I'm trying to think of it, but at least in the last 15 minutes, I could even say, they haven't been the ones picking the fights. It's all been the Valkyries. I think there was one moment where Haddix gets aggressive in mid in that time period, but otherwise, it has been a lot of the Valkyries dictating when things are going to happen. And it's mainly because, I mean, look at it. Like, Lasbra forced to fall back. There's finally his blink. And that's actually going to open up that Fire Giant call for the Valkyries again.
And Lasbra has no blink either, but Zero's been left behind!
Oh, finally, a little bit of a res. Raffer's going to be able to get him out, but that's going to time out soon, and that's going to open up some opportunities here for the Bolts. Raffer just gets eaten alive. Vin's damage, you mentioned it, we see it, and there it comes to fruition. Aegis used by Bera. He's alive for now, and the team is saving him. They help turn it around. He finally goes down, but Ice pays for it with his life. Immel, Zeros, Ducky, the last 3 standing as the rest of the Bolts surge forward around the Fire Giant.
Look at Lasbra's positioning, looking to hunt down Emilito. Emil's got the Aegis, but it doesn't do enough. Then finds his 4th 4-0-1 for the AMC in mid.
And now they've got the setup. Haddix and Jake. Good silence. Zero's isolated. He throws out the ult. Well, that's about all he's going to get. 4 members left standing. And you've got Haddix, who's nice and tanky. They could start up the FG, pick this up, and Ducky's the only one on the Valkyries who could have anything to say about it.
Man, Ven is just doing so much work right now. He's top of the player damage charts, 5-0-1 on this AMC, and feels like he nearly single-handedly turned that fight around. Ducky's trying to win this 2v1 and does force the ultimate out from Lasbra, but then Ven goes, they need me. I will simply come and show up and kill him for you
I
guys.
can't believe the perfect Fire Giant taking over there for Vin ends up paying off in spades for the kill, but now Raffer's here. That FG's low, and you have to be careful. Bolts able to secure it. Raffer will now lose his life. What feels like essentially 2 delayed deicides. Ice has respawned this time, and it stops it from happening. But it has been 6 kills for, I still believe, only 1 for the Bolts.
Yeah, and you get the sense that Ven is kind of used to his duo lane doing stuff like double med and dying early in a lot of games. You know, he looked right at home with understanding that he had to do a lot in this game, and he really has done quite a bit because the duo lane was not nearly as dominant in this game as they were in the first 2. Haddix as well, 0, 1, and 6 has done fine, but nothing that'll blow your doors off. But Ven has really been in the right spots. Bera putting out good damage, you know, 2nd on his team, 3rd overall in the game, but at that point got caught out. Ducky had such a good flank. It looked like a perfect position for the Valkyries to clean wipe that team fight, but they just didn't have the damage to bring down this AMC before he was able to burn them all down.
Well, they strip out the jungle. They get themselves a nice, hefty power play that they get to work with. Ice is actually pushing over on right-hand side. And remember, it is, well, was for a while there, a tower advantage for the Valkyries. Right now it's technically even. But one exposed Phoenix for the Bolts versus none on the side of the Valkyries map. Vin doing what Vin needs to do best, which right now is pushing up the left-hand side. Haddix pushes up mid. Soon the team's going to be able to regroup and really dictate which tower they want to take down.
This left-hand side seems nice and juicy for them. Not with as much expediency as their last Fire Giant in the last game, where they were able to get quite a bit off of it, but still, I mean, Ven and Bara, again, double Hunter. No Frenzy or Shoguns this time, so it won't be quite as jarringly fast to get these Phoenixes, but still like their odds of being able to crack the Valkyries base from this position.
And right now it's towers galore. They get the tier 2 in left, tier 2 in mid, and they're going to have minion waves in their favor. Not just regular minion waves either. Those are Oni minion waves coming down left and mid to enter the Phoenix. 5-man strong on the left-hand side. The Bolts are going to surge forward this wave. Jake taking it up. There's going to be a nice stun onto Raffer immediately into the backline onto Imolito. Circle of Protection gets dropped, and that's going to keep Vin nice and healthy. Med's still up, and the Phoenix goes down. Kill onto Raffer, and the ult doesn't even get the chance to get used. Now Zero's stunned out. No manages to immune that. Run back to the fountain, but Ducky goes down. 3v5 is all that's left. Ice has to go big here, and the defense needs to be mounted for the Valkyries.
Now still a lot of structures up, but the Bolts have the damage. Emilito's going to go down. Ven, 9 in a row for him, and the Olympus Bolts make quick work of the Valhalla Valkyries.
Close it out 3-0. Kind of like they did in the first 2 games, although it took them a little longer there
It did.
in game number 3. Progressively more defense from the Valkyries, but this time around, not too much that they were able to do in response. Despite the fact that they had a little bit of a lead, it's just a couple of fights, and all of a sudden the Bolts are right back in it.
Look, I mean, when we took a look at this Group B coming in, we knew that the Dragons and the Bolts were by far the teams that we favored the most to come out of this group. And the Bolts came in, took care of business, did exactly what they were supposed to do, just as the Dragons did earlier today up against their SCC counterparts. It's a matter of what comes next for these teams. How is that matchup going to look? You know, did either team show a little bit too much? Did they end up giving the other team some strategies? Can't wait for that Bolts-Dragons matchup, man. I think it's going to be a ton of fun.
Get Bolts-Dragons. You also get Sleekness Valkyries, which I'm actually going to be excited for. It'll be interesting to see that. I believe that one's going to be on Saturday. Tomorrow, we'll get to watch the Bolts take on the Dragons. Right now, though, I'm sure they're happy and feeling fine. We're going to break this game down, talk to the Bolts, all sorts of stuff right after this.
Perfect time, then channels divinity. Guess who's here? It's Lazarus. He's here. He's got Blink. No, Vote doesn't have any beat. Jump in, double stun. That's perfect. For the Olympus Bolts. And it is going to be another 2 kills.
Don't be wasting time, I wanna see your smile. Hey, you wanna go with me? I'll be your fantasy, let's do this secretly. And if you stay the night, yeah, if I do alright, you might be coming back for more. And if you're coming back, we must be on the right track, and I'm stepping up for sure. If it's alright with you, I'll bring a table for 2 at this fancy restaurant. And if you still want me, I'll make sure to be the best you ever had. If I was your man, I'd be the best you ever had.
Hello and welcome back to the desk. One final time for today, at least. The Olympus Bolts get the 3-0 victory over the Valhalla Valkyries and put themselves one step closer to the Smite World Championship. A victory today means that now they only have to defeat the Dragons tomorrow if they want to go to the Smite World Championship. That will be no tall task. It's J-Mac and Mifflin here one final time on the desk. Talk about Game 3, talk about the set, and talk about the future that's going on tomorrow. Mifflin, you're sporting some nice nice jacket there.
Well, 2 of them to be exact.
You're right. There are 2 jackets
That's
there.
right. Oh, you guys want to get that little SPL merch, dude?
That's the
Is that merch?
that's
You see that?
the bundle hoodie.
That's
bundle
right. Well,
hoodie.
it's a jacket.
The bundle jacket. My
So,
apologies.
okay. You know
the
what?
bundle jacket.
You guys have been talking around my explanation of this the entire time. I feel like I need to make my case.
Okay, here we go.
Jackets are a broad category, to be sure. It's like a squares rectangle conversation. But here's the thing. You can have a pullover. That's anything that you pull over. It's an outerwear. Fine. You put a hood on it, you got a hoodie. If there is a zipper or buttons or anything like that, it becomes a jacket. Thank you. What were we talking about? The Bolts? Good job, Bolts.
Yes, we're talking about the Bolts and the Valkyries. The Bolts specifically with their win here today. A lot more signs of life out of the Valkyries there in game number 3. Though a little bit of fun to be had with the Bolts out of a meditation neath that came out of Barracuda
That
there
went
in the
hard.
duo alone. Look,
That went crazy.
Look, they lost like a 3-on-3 fight when they had 2 meds versus 1.
Yeah, the Valks were just playing out of their minds clearly because that is a strategy that I think defies the meta. It defies the times. It is going to last longer than Smite itself. There's always going to be something double meting.
Well, when it came down to the end of it all, it was the Bolts who come out victorious. They were able to get past this double assassin. The cleanest solo, not something that I would have initially expected. I've seen it passingly in like ranked games. If I ever tune into like watching Nico play, he's done it a couple of times, but didn't honestly expect to come out of here in an SPL game. Did all right for them for the first half of it, but I mean, when your Amuzen Cobb mid essentially goes unchecked the entire game, it's going to be a pretty nice one when you get towards late game.
Yeah, luckily for the Bolts, Ven kept his head on straight throughout this one while the dual lane was dropping one of the fattest intos I've ever seen. But that said, the Olympus Bolts, no stranger to playing for behind, I suppose, and are able to bounce back towards the end of this game. I thought the Valhalla Valkyries were making significant strides between each individual match. Game 1, blown out of the water. Game 2, they found their fight. Game 3, they found their fight and some objectives. So if this game had been a best of 7, maybe Game 4, we'd have been looking at a Valk stub.
Would have been a very long set indeed. Raffer going down 0-6-7. Struggled a little bit towards the latter half of the fights. Jake 0-3-12 on the E-set support. Played twice in a row and got 2 wins out here. So between wins with the SEC boys with Quig and now wins here out of Jake on the Bolts with this E-set, we may be in for a meta where E-set kind of sticks around for a while.
Yeah, we might be. I got to give shout-outs to one of the Season 2 SPL subs. There's a guy named Left08 out there, and he was playing ESET support in, like, 2013. So he's the progenitor. He did it first.
Well, there you go. There you have it. Well, speaking of the supports and support gods, we do have Jake sitting by for our post-game interview with Gormize. Let's start right over them and talk.
That's right. Once again, sitting around comfortable in the Smite Maxnomic chairs. Yep. Jake, I want to ask you, I've got a couple of questions, but the first one is just, what inspired the ESET, right? Like, you know, your first game, things go pretty well, but then you swap over. What inspired you to go to that pick?
So a lot of people have been playing ISIS 4 into scrims, and I was like, hey, you know, that looks pretty good. 2.5 second silence into a 1 second stun.
Sounds pretty good.
Pretty lethal combo.
So, as easy as that. That's a lethal combo. You set it up. Game 3. What happened at the beginning? What the stumbles? Huh?
We decided to go double med. You know, the server was a little bit laggy. I don't want to blame it on that. But I'm thinking my guy that usually hits my abilities. But I tried spear balling the Kepri and didn't hit him. You know, I don't know what's going on there. But yeah.
Unfortunately, didn't connect. Well, hey, you know what? You win this set 3-0. You're going up against the Dragons tomorrow, I believe, in order to try and secure your spot at Worlds. How are you feeling about that one?
You know, it's about time we go goat mode here. You know, end of the year, time to go off and go crazy. And I think that's just what me and my team are going to do tomorrow.
You know what? That's what we got last year, so it's what I'm expecting now. You hear it first from Jake. Thanks, man. Congrats on your win once again.
Thank you. Oh.
And we'll, come on. And then we'll go back to the desk.
He just kind of just left you hanging there for a second, Gore. At the end of the day, you finally do get the fist bump that you want. It was the Olympus Bolts. Time to go GOAT mode.
Wow.
According to Jake here,
I thought he
up
was going to
against the
bleat
Jake
at us
Dragon.
for a moment. I was really expecting like a goat screech. Jake's still in here. Jake, can you give us a little goat noise?
That would have thrown me off. I don't know if they could. I don't know if anybody can hear that.
They did.
Or not.
I heard it, and that's all I need.
We heard it, and that's all that matters. It's left up to the imagination of those at home. The Olympus Bolts, thank you. We were told that it was live, so I hope you guys got to enjoy that. Olympus Bolts hoping to not be the Olympus Dolts tomorrow, instead wanting to be the Olympus Goats to try and get a win up against the Jade Dragons. Let's take a look back at what happened today, maybe. I mean, we did get the Jade Dragons. They got their 3-0 over Sleekness. Now everybody able to move themselves on. And now with the Olympus Bolts 3-0 over the Valks, they move on. So we're going to see the Dragons and the Bolts face off tomorrow. And then later on in the week, we'll see Sleekness take on the Valhalla Valkyries. And then the loser of the Dragons and the Bolts, and then the winner of Sleekness and Valkyries face off for their second chance to make it to the SWC.
I'm glad you broke that down, man. I went cross-eyed trying to read that page. You are a better one than me. Here, do this one too.
Okay, well, it's the same thing. So you see the Dragons and the Bolts, they play, and Sleekness and Valkyries play. And then now the winner of the Dragons and the Bolts, they just go straight to SWC. They don't have to do nothing. They go straight to the SWC.
All you got to do is beat the Jade Dragons free.
Or for the Dragons, all you have to do is beat the Olympus Bolts.
Equally free.
Equally there. And then the loser of that match plays the winner of the third place match between Sleekness and Valkyries, and then the winner of that goes on to the Smite World Championship. So that'd be your two teams. And then we get to see, kind of a look at Group A here in a moment to kind of see it's something very similar to them.
There's two groups?
There's two groups. That was Group B.
That was Group B.
Yeah, we were in Group B today. There was Group A yesterday. But now we get to see both groups tomorrow.
Okay, A and B.
Because it's the finals of both of them.
Got it.
Specifically, we get Leviathans and Scarabs tomorrow.
Oh, snap.
The Scarabs just need to beat the Leviathans to go to the SWC.
It's actually so free.
And the Leviathans just got to beat the Scarabs to go to the SWC.
Equally free, man.
But
God, so
unfortunate,
easy.
one of them does have to lose, but they get a second chance because then they get to play the winner of the Winter Dogs and the Oni Warriors for a second chance to go to the SWC. And that all broken down here on our schedule. We'll get to see the bronze matches, the two teams that lost yesterday and today.
You call them bronze heads?
The bronze matches.
Is that what you're saying?
No, the bronze matches.
That's
what they're
crazy.
called. It's called the bronze match on the bracket, Mifflin.
I'm glad you said it.
It's called the bronze match because
Okay.
they're not going for first or second at that time. They're kind of going for that third, fourth there. It's their last chance, the third place, the bronze medal, whichever one you want to go out there.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them
That's
bronze.
their opportunity through it. Anyways, Mifflin, they'll play on Saturday. The finals are tomorrow, and then their last chance to play in will be on Sunday. So we're sending 2 people to Worlds tomorrow and then 2 people on Sunday. So if there's any 2 days that you really want to watch this SWC, it's going to be tomorrow when we send 2 people to the SWC or tune in Sunday. But make sure that you tune in tomorrow on behalf of me, Mifflin, everybody else who is working here, production casters, and everyone behind the scenes. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow once more for the SWC qualifiers.
Blah. That's my goat noise.